I pass you over to Stephen Tripp, who will be your host for the rest of the session. Thank you.
How you going, everyone? Can I get everyone to stand up for the national anthem, please? Thanks, everyone. That was some lovely singing. Don't worry about the ending, screwing up the ending there. The first session did the same thing, so don't worry too much about it. Yeah, those of us who were in the first session, we knew what was coming. So, thank you for coming here today. My name is Stephen Tripp. I do a podcast called Commanding the Narrative, and I've also been published in The Spectator and other places as well. Thank you very much to Tony, who was organised today at this fantastic venue. The first session was fantastic, and hopefully this session will be just as good. I just want to acknowledge Mr. Chris De Bruin here, who's doing all the filming today. It is going to be recorded, so thank you, Chris. If you would like to see where the recording is, please follow his YouTube channel or his Facebook at Chris Coveries and see all his great work there. And also, we're going to be having a Q&A at the end. Now, if you want to ask a question, head down to Nicole at the back. She's got a notepad. Look, if you need to jump up at any time, you're not going to be rude to do so. So feel free to head to the back, write down your questions. Please make them legible. The first session we had some ones we couldn't read quite well. But please make them clear so we can read them out at the end for all our special guests. But let's get started. Actually, before I do, I'll just let you know as well. If you need water, it's over there. Tea and coffee is out at the front as you walk in as well. And we'll probably have a 5-minute break halfway through if you need to get up and stretch your legs. But our first speaker right now is Professor Ian Plimer. Now, Professor Plimer is the emeritus, I can't say that today, Professor of Earth Scientists at the University of Melbourne. He has published 15 books, including Green Murder, and his recent trilogy on climate change for children and young adults, the Little Green Book, which you can purchase here today. As a geologist, he has published more than 130 scientific papers and was one of the Trinity editors of the 5-volume Encyclopedia of Geology. So that would be pretty amazing, I would imagine. Most importantly, he has led the vanguard against climate alarmism. He has done so with facts and science. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure he's going to bestow some of that on us now. Please welcome Professor Ian Plimer.
Oh, it's an IQ test. I've failed it already.
I'll get it for you.
Well, thank you for coming. As a geologist, we look at the past. We try to understand what the past is, which gives us a window into the present. And so, when we look at the past, we see cycles of climate. And we have one cycle of climate which occurs about every 400 million years when you pull apart the crust and stitch it back together again. And every 143 million years we have a bad address in the galaxy and we get bombarded by cosmic particles, we form clouds and it cools down. And that's when we have the ice ages. And only this year it was discovered that Mars actually controls climate on the planet also, with cycles every 2.4 million years. And then we have the well-known Milankovitch cycles, which are every 100,000, 41 and 23,000 years. And that's the Earth's orbit. Sometimes it's circular, sometimes it's elliptical. Sometimes the axis changes a little bit, and sometimes we wobble like a top. All of those get us closer or further from the sun. And if we're further from the sun, it's cool. If we're closer, it's warmer. And then the sun pumps out variable amounts of energy. And that variable amount of energy gives us warm and cool times. And then we've got some other things. Every 60 years, we have warmer ocean conditions. And every 18.7 years, we push warm water up into the Arctic. You'll notice there that not one climate cycle in the past is related to carbon dioxide. Not one. So we've never seen the influence of carbon dioxide in the past. We've only actually seen the opposite. And this is some of our Milankovitch cycles. And the little red area is when it's warm, and that's called an interglacial. The blue areas is when we've got ice. And this is for the last 400,000 years on planet Earth. We've had ice, and then short periods when it's warm, and then back into ice. You can see on the far right, that current interglacial that we're in is shorter, and it's not as intense as previous interglacials. We're actually quite cool compared with previous times. And the spikes of the bluish bit are where we have sudden warming and sudden cooling. And the warming we're getting at present, the rate of warming is nothing compared with the past. The rate of cooling is nothing. The past was much faster. And that's for the last 400,000 years. If you look at the current period of time, when we're in a warm interglacial, when we're a bit closer to the sun, we see within that are cycles of warming and cooling. The pink, or meant to be red, is when it's warmer, and the blue is when it's cooler. And this is due to changes in solar activity. The sun pumps out variable amounts of energy. And we've had warm periods like the Minoan warming or the Roman warming or the medieval warming, where it was about 5 degrees warmer than now. And we know that from measuring proxies. We know it from looking at agricultural records of the Romans. They grew grapes right up in northern Yorkshire. You couldn't do that today. And so this is telling us that we have cycles of climate. And you don't have to be colourblind. You can work out what the next cycle is. We are in an interglacial. There's only one thing that's going to happen. We're going to go back into a glaciation. We don't know exactly when that'll be, but I can guarantee it'll be Tuesday. And no amount of legislation coming from the UN or Canberra is going to change that. The legislation will not change the orbit of the Earth. But these cycles are quite interesting, and we can see a cycle here which we can get from history. We've plotted in temperature against when the Northwest Passage was open, and that's a 60-year cycle. That's the ocean cycle. So if you want to go exploring the Northwest Passage and it's open, as it is at present, don't blame it on carbon dioxide in the atmosphere or climate change. It's a natural cycle. We've seen it time and time again. And these natural cycles are really imprinted into life. And life sucks up various chemicals, and we can look at the chemical fingerprint. This is bottom-dwelling life, and we can see that we have cycles of life. And that cycle of life on the screen is based on temperature. So this has got nothing to do with carbon dioxide. If we look at the lower atmospheric temperature measurements, we get that from balloons. We get it from satellites. We do not get it from temperature measurements with a thermometer. They are adjusted and they have huge errors. And we can see there's a bit of a cycle in there, and we can see that high up in the atmosphere we have great temperature changes. We see this going right back to the 1870s. That couldn't be related to modern industry. So carbon dioxide doesn't seem to be doing anything. But we get told that we're suffering climate change. We've got a climate catastrophe, a climate disaster. Well, let's look at the evidence. We get cycles, and we can see rainfall in this precipitous island called England. We get rainfall, which is cyclical. We don't see any sudden increase in rainfall. We don't see any sudden warming. We don't see anything that's unusual. So what we're enjoying today is what we enjoyed yesterday. Nothing unusual. We look at the hurricanes and we see the top curve is where we get maximum hurricane energy, and the lower one is where we get smaller hurricanes. And again, we can see that some years we get intense energy, other years not so intense. And that these hurricanes we have measured for more than 150 years, and nothing unusual is happening today. You cannot say that we're in a climate catastrophe with more hurricanes today than we had in the past. So what we're being told is not what the evidence tells us. Sea level's up and down like a yo-yo. And we can see the yo-yo with the blue as sea level and the red as the energy coming out of the sun. And every time the sun's very energetic, we heat up ocean water, it expands, and sea level goes up. So we can see solar cycles represented in sea level, and we cannot see any evidence that we are going to need snorkels or we're going to drown. There is no climate catastrophe we see in this. By looking at drill cores in ice at the poles, we can start to get a very good idea of what's happening, and there are chemical proxies you can get from the ice, and these chemical proxies can give you the temperature. So the green line is temperature, and you can see that temperature has increased over the last 15,000 years or so, and temperature's been up and down like a yo-yo, and that temperature change is not driving sea level perfectly in a linear fashion. There's a bit of variation in there. So it's not only temperature driving sea level change, it's other things as well. And we can see the blue line, which is sea level change. We can see the last 8,000 years or so in the top right, where temperature's just roughly the same, up and down a little bit. So we can see that we've had about 130 metres of sea level rise since the end of the last glaciation, which was 14,700 years ago. So sea level has been rising. It's got nothing to do with carbon dioxide. It's to do with other factors. So it's clear that carbon dioxide is not driving sea level change. Carbon dioxide is not driving temperature. And we've got some fairly long sea level records. Fort Denison in Sydney Harbour was a fort to keep out the Russian Navy, and this was started to be built in the Crimean War. The Crimean War finished, and they hadn't finished Fort Denison. It was later they finished it, but it's done a good job. We've never had the Russian Navy invade Sydney Harbour, but we can see there might be faint cycles in there, but I can't see any great sudden rise in sea level. There's no climate catastrophe. We're not going to drown. And we can go to the poster card of sea level, and this is Tuvalu. The top red line is maximum sea level, the bottom is minimum, and the green is the average. Tuvalu is telling us nothing has been happening with sea level. It's been going up and down a little bit. And we've known that for a long while. Charles Darwin, on his expedition around the world, received books from Charles Lyell when Darwin was travelling, and these books he picked up at ports and read them, and Lyell argued that volcanoes out in the Pacific and out in the Indian had coral grow on top of them, and then the volcano subsided and the coral kept growing. And Darwin was fascinated with that idea. He went and checked a large number of atolls in the Pacific Ocean and put out a book in 1842 on coral atolls, and showed with the top diagram, here's a volcano sticking above the water level, and it started to sink and coral started to grow on it. In fact, we have satellite information now from the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean showing us that we have actually increased the area of coral atolls. They're not decreasing. These Pacific Island atoll nations are not getting consumed by sea level rise. They're actually growing. And the data's been there since 1842, but we don't hear that. But you can't only talk about sea level rise. You've got to talk about land levels going up and down. Sydney Harbour is a drowned river valley. Did the land fall or did the sea level rise? In the east coast of Australia, we've got little nicks from waves at the bottom of cliffs. Did the land rise or did the sea level fall? These questions are never asked, but you can go to parts of the world, such as northern Norway, where we had 5 kilometres of ice on top of Norway, and the weight of the ice pushed Norway down a bit. That ice has been removed in our current interglacial, and Norway is rising. These are old beaches. The highest one above sea level in Norway is 340 metres above sea level. So Scandinavia has been rising. You can check it out. You can go to the medieval castle of Turku, and Turku Castle was built out in the Gulf of Bothnia on an island to stop the Swedish invaders getting there. Well, you can walk there now. I've walked there because Scandinavia has risen, and so instead of it being an island, it's a peninsula coming out from Turku. So you cannot talk about sea level change without talking about land level change, but you never hear that. In eastern Australia, we have a constant change in sea level, and we can see that top right figure is about 2.5 metres above the current sea level. These are beds of oysters growing on this granite boulder, and this is when sea level was higher. We've been able to get a carbon date on that, and that's showing us that in the Holocene optimum, in other words 8,000 to 4,000 years ago, sea level was higher. It's since dropped. So we've got the evidence written there. Very hard to argue against it. So there's two possibilities. Either the land level's risen a little bit or the sea level's dropped. In this case, it may well be a combination of both. So you have to be very, very careful when people are saying temperature's rising, or we're getting more hurricanes, or we're getting more rainfall, or we're getting more droughts. History and the geological record shows that things are very different from that. But you are being scared by climate models. This is where all factors are wound into a computer model, and we're told we're going to fry and die, and these are the models. The red line is an average of 102 models, and the blue and the green are the measurements we have made from balloons and satellites. So in one case, the models over the last 30 years have been telling us we're going to fry and die, and then when you make the measurements over the last 30 years, it's not the case. So the whole of the climate change propaganda is based on models, not on measurements. And this graph shows it. Now, these models told us that above the equator, top left diagram, we were going to have a hotspot above the equator. We've had 30 million weather balloons go into the atmosphere, and we've been able to measure what's happening, and you see, bottom right, that there's no hotspot. So the models are not right. The models only put in what we want them to give us. And the models assume that carbon dioxide drives climate change. When you do models without using carbon dioxide, you get a very different story. So be very careful when someone tells you it's going to warm up. What's the basis of it? We get told that we're getting more and more bushfires today, and we're all ruined. Well, that's not the case. We can measure from satellites and from land surveys the amount of land that's burnt out by bushfires. On the planet, that area of land has been decreasing. In the US, that area of land has been decreasing. And in Australia, that area of land has been decreasing. So we're not getting more bushfires. We might be getting more spot fires, and we might be getting more lunatics go out and light fires, which is the major cause of bushfires. We are actually getting less land burned. And when we look in Australia, we see in the tropics, the dry tropics, we see the red areas are areas where we're getting 100% of the land burnt every year. And this is normal to get the fires in the savannah of northern Australia. And if you look at southwestern, southeastern Australia and Tasmania, we get far fewer fires. The incidence of fires are a lot less. They might be more intense, but we're not getting more area burnt out, and we're not getting more fires. The numbers are giving us a very different story. But what we're told is that more and more people are dying from climate disasters. When you look at the data, it's a different story. Yes, carbon dioxide on the left is increasing, and on the right, we can see that the number of disasters is actually decreasing. So what we're being told and what the numbers tell us are two very different things. So we're not in a climate crisis. There's no climate catastrophe. We don't have to worry about hurricanes or cyclones. We've got measurements going back to the 1850s of hurricanes in the US. And these Atlantic hurricanes, I can't see any great increase in hurricane activity since we've had industrialisation. So when we start looking at the hurricanes that fall on the land in Florida, we can see in the two colours here, they're just different intensity of hurricanes, but those hurricanes are not making any impact. They're not affected by carbon dioxide. They're not affected by modern times. So there's something wrong with the narrative we're being given. We're not having a climate disaster. And when you look at the cyclones in Queensland, we're not seeing evidence of a climate catastrophe, even though we're putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we can forget those as being a parameter of a climate catastrophe. When we look at rainfall, we've got very good records from Observatory Hill in Sydney, and these different lines are number of rainfall days and number of hours it rains and amount of rainfall, etc. But on the right-hand side of those diagrams, we do not see any change as a result of having an industrialised society. We don't see any change at all. So all we can say is, well, we're not seeing a climate catastrophe in rainfall. Well, what about flooding? The Brisbane Valley gets flooded quite often. The post office in Brisbane has been flooded many times. We've got extremely good records of intense floods in red and very weak floods in green and the average floods in yellow. And the biggest flooding in Brisbane is in former times. It's not at present. So we might be getting newspaper stories and television stories of crying babies and weeping mothers and saying, oh, you know, we're all drowning. But the data is showing you a different story. We're not seeing a climate catastrophe with flooding. So what about the extinction of life? Well, we've got very good records of extinction of life, and we've had complex life for the last 20% of time. And this is a plot of last 20% of time showing the big blue bars are mass extinctions of life, major mass extinctions of life. The smaller blue bars are minor mass extinctions. And then at the bottom, we've always got extinction. And so we have what is called species turnover. We are killing off life and forming new life all the time. So we don't see an increase in the rate of extinction. We see the exact opposite. People go measuring the number of species, the number of genera, the number of families of life, and this one's just on families, and we can see that since we've had complex life on Earth, the amount of families of life have actually increased. They've not decreased. So we're not in a period of extinction, we're in a period of the exact opposite. Well, what about temperature? Surely temperature's going up and surely we're going to fry and die. Well, you can look at thermometer measurements, which are not that accurate, but we can see since we've had thermometer measurements of about 1850, except for one place in central England where it goes back further, but we've had 3 periods of warming and 2 of cooling. So if carbon dioxide drives warming, how do we explain the cooling? If carbon dioxide drives warming, why is the slope, the pink slope there, all the same? So we're not seeing any evidence in the past of carbon dioxide driving warming. And that's over the last 150 years or so. Well, let's look at recent times and start looking at the satellite measurements, which are the red line, and plot the amount of carbon dioxide we're putting out into the atmosphere. Now, satellite measurements are telling us we've got cycles of temperature, which is related to the sun, these 11-year cycles of the sun, and we've got a slight decrease in temperature over the last 15 years or so, during which time we've had carbon dioxide increase. So how can you have a decrease in temperature and an increase in carbon dioxide when carbon dioxide is meant to give us warming? So the evidence is not there. Well, let's look further back in time. As a geologist, I look back at the last 500 million years, which is only 20% of time, and the black line is atmospheric carbon dioxide and the blue line is temperature. So if you look at temperature, we have a dip on the left-hand side of the diagram, and that is a well-documented ice age. We have another big dip in the centre of the diagram, and that's an ice age, and we see evidence of that ice age in Lithgow, Newcastle, Wollongong area. That's a very prominent ice age, and this is when we were at the South Pole, and a continent drifted across the South Pole and it became very cold. We see another ice age onto the right with that blue line, and that we see in the opal fields, where we see boulders have been dropped by floating ice and dropped into the opal dirt. And then on the far right, we see that for the last 50 million years, temperature's been going down. We're actually in an ice age. And we know we're in an ice age because we've got polar ice. We've been cooling down for 50 million years. And then when you look at the black line, carbon dioxide, there's no relationship between carbon dioxide, the black line, and the blue line. In fact, carbon dioxide has decreased from 0.7% to 0.04% in that period of time. And when carbon dioxide was high, we actually had ice ages. So carbon dioxide could not be driving temperature. But what we have is a crisis of carbon dioxide. And we hear those words, and we certainly do have a crisis of carbon dioxide. We don't have enough of it. We've had a decrease in carbon dioxide for the last 140 million years. If the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere halves, we will lose vegetation on planet Earth. We will have no life on planet Earth. We are in an absolute crisis of carbon dioxide. So that's the exact opposite of what you're hearing. So let's go back to our ice cores and start looking at temperature. And there's chemical fingerprints to get temperature. And the middle and the left-hand side of the diagram with those three spikes are what is called the Holocene optimum, the time when humans were around and we had optimum temperatures. And since the Minoan warming, right in the centre of the diagram, it has been cooling down. During that cooling period, we've had the Roman warming, and we've had the medieval warming, we've had the Dark Ages between the Roman warming and the medieval warming, and we've had the Little Ice Age to the right-hand side of the medieval warming. We're actually on a cooling cycle. We have finished our interglacial. Most interglacials last for 10,000 years. Ours started at 14,700 years ago, and we finished about 4,000 years ago. We've had our 10,000 years. Time's up, folks. And unless you can change the orbit of the planet and the way the sun pumps out energy, we will be heading into another cool period. Now, that's no problems. We've adapted. We live on ice sheets. We live in the tropics. We live in the Alps. We live on the coast. We live in the deserts. We humans can adapt. It might be a bit difficult for some, but we can adapt. So the long-term record, which we geologists look at, say we have cycles of climate, and we are now in a cooling cycle. But we're told, no, it's carbon dioxide that drives global warming. Well, again, we can go to the ice, pull out little bits of carbon dioxide that got trapped in the falling snow and measure when that occurred. And we can see, if we go from right, that's older, to left, which is the modern times, we see that spike on the right. That's an increase in temperature. Later, the blue line, carbon dioxide increases. So it's temperature that's warming up the oceans, releasing carbon dioxide. It's not the opposite. It's not an increase in carbon dioxide giving us more temperature. It's the exact opposite of what you're being told. Now, we know that from chemistry. We know it from playing with a soft drink. If you leave a soft drink out in the sun and open it, it will explode with carbon dioxide being released. If you cool that soft drink, you will dissolve all the gas. Carbon dioxide actually has an inverse solubility. The colder it is, the more it dissolves. So we know it from chemistry, we know it from ice cores, and we know that carbon dioxide doesn't drive a temperature increase. It's the opposite. We also know that we've had a slight increase in carbon dioxide over the last 40 or 50 years when we've had satellite measurements, and we've been measuring vegetation. And because we've been putting more carbon dioxide, which is plant food, because we've been putting more of it into the atmosphere, we've had a greening of the planet. And just to confuse you, the greening is the blue areas. So in southeastern Australia and in northern India and in the Amazon and in the tropical Africa and in the tundra, we've actually had an increase in the amount of vegetation. And that's because we've had more plant food in the atmosphere. So carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's actually plant food. It's decreasing, and if we don't have enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we can't grow food. It's pretty simple. So The story you're hearing is a very different story. And I'm arguing that the solution to this non-problem of putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is to thoughtfully do nothing. I have been chasing climate scientists at various institutes for more than a decade now to give me half a dozen scientific papers that demonstrate that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. They've never given me anything. I've been abused, I've had obfuscation, but they have never shown me scientifically that human emissions drive global warming. And of course, if they did, then they'd have to show that the natural emissions, which are 97% of the total, don't drive global warming. So it's never been done. So the whole story of human emissions is a house of cards. And because it's of a house of cards, all the wind turbines and solar factories, etc. afterwards, are based on a scientific fallacy. No past warming has been related to carbon dioxide. It's related to other processes. Today, we're living in boring times. There's nothing unusual about today. We're in our normal cycles of climate. And at present, we're in a warm interglacial. It's going to end. No politician in Canberra can change that. No UN can change that. So, perish the thought. I mean, here's an impossible thought. What happens if I'm wrong? What happens if everything I've told you is totally wrong? Well, you can do the sums. And if I'm wrong and we reduce emissions, what's it going to do? So if we reduce emissions, say, by 50%, then using the climatologist models, we will reduce temperature by 0.007 degrees Celsius. So if I move over to here, I've already changed that temperature. It's not going to kill you, 0.007. Why spend trillions of dollars changing the whole energy system on something that is ineffectual and something that scientifically is not proven? So we have a serious problem. And our wind and solar industrial complexes are increasing costs, and other speakers will give you this information, totally destroying productive farming land. There is no reason on good fertile land to put a solar industrial facility. There's no reason to destroy the vista, destroy birds, destroy bats, destroy forests by putting in wind facilities. Absolutely no reason to do that at all. It is not environmental. We're actually killing off the environment by using this. So emissions are going to make, changing emissions are going to make no difference. The science is not backing up that carbon dioxide drives global warming, yet we are spending trillions of your money putting in these monstrosities across farming land. And you people don't get listened to. These are elites in Canberra and in Macquarie Street. These are people who are running a solar business, buying Chinese equipment to run it. You have no say. You are completely being bulldozed. And what is happening is there's an attack on food production. There's an attack on farming. There's an attack on our sovereignty, where we depend upon energy for our modern life. If we need Chinese wind turbines and Chinese solar panels, then we're dependent upon someone else to have the fundamentals of a good life. And that's terribly dangerous in my view. And for any industrial society, you need cheap energy. You cannot survive without cheap and reliable energy. And so what are we doing? We have destroyed a reliable, cheap energy system, which we had based on coal. We are now putting in a new energy system where we're traversing the country with grids, destroying farmland with solar and wind areas. And I argue that we're in a period where people have collectively gone bonkers and we have gone nuts. And what is happening is that we are going through another one of these cycles where the whole community is a herd going in this direction. We've seen it before. We had a Dutch tulip craze where in the 1660s people would pay twice their annual income to buy a tulip bulb. And the bubble burst, of course, and Holland, which was a very wealthy country, became poor. We saw it with the South Sea bubble. Again, another one of these bubbles. We are now having an energy bubble, And we have one very good example showing how societies have collectively gone bonkers. And this was during a period of time when we came out of the medieval warming, and we can see that on the red line, that peaks there. We came into the Little Ice Age. Now, all of a sudden, people said, oh, it's getting cold, our crops are failing, we've got to blame someone. And we blamed the witches. And so what we did was we burnt witches and we killed witches, and when we'd finished doing that, if you look at the bottom right of this diagram, the temperature started to go up. So they were right. Burning witches changes climate. And we are doing exactly the same thing today. We are burning off our whole power system on the false assumption that we can change global energy. And that is wrong. Now, you will only hear this story from a geologist who works with the past. You won't hear it from someone who's in a university and depends upon research grants and lives in a climate institute. You'll only hear it from independent people. And I'm very passionate about this. I've written a number of books on climate change, and I'm concerned about how our kids are becoming emotionally disturbed by all the pressures that are on them. And so I'm currently editing a volume which will come out at the CPAC conference in Brisbane on the 4th of October, editing a volume on climate hysteria and how that is affecting our children. But I put out a trilogy of books for school children, and these are 8 to 12-year-olds, these are 12 to 16 and then above 16. And this trilogy of books is 3 different ways I deal with climate. The first one for little tackers, and I call it for ankle biters. And this is, you know, we all know what 8-year-old kids are like. If you talk about farting, they go into spasms of laughter uncontrollably. So the first book for kids is about farts, about the carbon cycle, about what you eat and how you convert it into carbon compounds. And the messages there are about net zero, how it's impossible. And the message there is about the carbon cycle. And the message there is about how we are carbon-based life. The second one is for teenagers, and these teenagers are generally a bit troublesome, and they'll complain and they'll whinge and moan. Well, if you're a teenager swanning around in an electric vehicle, you probably wouldn't get to Oberon because you wouldn't have the capacity to get here, but if you're swanning around in an electric vehicle and you're feeling morally superior, think again, because to get the cobalt into that electric vehicle, you have children as slaves working in the cobalt mines of the Congo for the Chinese so they can dominate the cobalt market, so they can dominate the electric vehicle market. So don't talk to me about things being unfair. Don't talk to me about the morals of climate change. Have a look at yourself. And so in that book for the teenagers, I give some basic science and attack the moral arguments. And the third book is for, what do I call the third book, Bronwyn? That's my daughter, Bronwyn, who will be selling the books to you. The third book is for 20s and Wrinklies. And that's going through, in layman's language, the basics of climate change and how it could not possibly be driven by carbon dioxide. And the book Green Murder is I go into what these green policies do for us. They send us broke. They kill off businesses. They kill off wildlife. They actually are not environmental at all. And I go into renewable energy, and I point out that the only thing renewable about renewable energy are the subsidies. They just keep coming, and it's your money. So as someone who's spent more than 50 years in science, I'm appalled at the breakdown of the scientific method. I'm appalled at how people are being bought off very easily, and I'm appalled about how we totally ignore the past. And anyone that comes up with an alternative idea, as I have, you get demonised. I'm happy to be demonised. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Plimer. I think we're so lucky to have people like Professor Plimer speak out in this country. And I just wish that we could send Professor Plimer around to all the schools in Australia to give the same half an hour presentation. And I see a young gentleman in the front row here. Good on you, mate, for coming today and listening to this presentation, because we need more young people to hear about it. Our next speaker is Tony Alevraz. He's put on this symposium today, and thank you, Tony, for doing so. This is a fantastic venue, and it has proved to be a really good day. Tony formerly served in the Royal Australian Air Force as an electronic engineer. He is also a software developer. In 1993, Tony founded Eureka Multimedia, which became Australia's leading and award-winning educational software development company, creating over 110 software titles distributed throughout Australia, New Zealand and South Africa. In 2017, Tony designed and then commenced building this 5-star estate here in Oberon. He's been a local and he knows the area and he knows what's happening. So let's please welcome Tony right now. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Stephen. Professor Plimer, you have one hard of an act to follow, I'll tell you. Actually, it reminds me, as I said to you earlier, when I was in primary school, and we had to do a project on climate, and back then it was global cooling, and then 20 years later, the narrative changes. So, whether or not that was an incentive, financial incentive, a incentive for control, to change the science, you guys be the judge. Anyway, so let's have a look at the solutions. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Okay. Let's have the solutions they've offered us that kind of is underpinned by the science, as they say. Okay. It's going to load up. Let's take its time. It's having a think.
It's had a rough old day.
Oh, no. It's tired. I think it wants to go to sleep. Come on. Yeah, I know that too. Oh, what's happening now? Come on. You can do it. You can do it. It's been sabotaged. I think Asia's got into my computer. All right, here we go. Okay, are renewables, wind and solar, actually renewable? And are they the answer to an ever-increasing demand for energy? Growing economies require adequate, reliable and affordable energy every second of the day, and that's key. The Australian government's net zero aim is that 80% of our power is to be generated by renewables by 2050. Now, will renewables deliver affordable, reliable power that minimises environmental and social harms? So let's have a look at some government legislation. In March 2022, the Victorian Parliament released a report into renewable energy stating that to meet net zero targets, onshore renewables could require up to 70% of Victoria's agricultural land to host these wind and solar farms. In New South Wales, local government planning and land use regulations have effectively been overridden by state significant infrastructure legislation. So that development we've got going on down south of Oberon is unfortunately out of the council's hands. It's at state level, so all decisions are made at state level. This all came about on October the 12th, 2021, when the Energy Legislation Amendment Bill made amendments to the Forestry Act of 2012, effectively rezoning all of New South Wales state pine forests to allow giant renewable infrastructures to be rolled out. The bill states that privately owned land must be purchased having an area at least twice as large as the area used for the construction and operation of the renewable energy infrastructure. Let's have a look at some footprints of these solar and wind farms. So I asked Microsoft's AI, and I've done the same thing with ChatGPT-4 and also Grok, which is X's AI platform. And I asked them, I said, to compare the footprints of a 1 gigawatt wind farm, a 1 gigawatt solar farm, to a 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant. and you guys in the back might not be able to see this, but it came back and it stated that a 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant is about 3.4 kilometres square, and a solar farm will need to be up to 75 times that size to be as effective, and a wind farm would need to be up to 360 times that size to be effective. So wind and solar are very intensive forms of energy. So I've got a video here which has been created by Stephen Nalkowski. Apparently it's the latest 3D rendering, and this just shows you a 3D rendering of the actual wind farms that are going down, one that's called the Pines and the Paling Yards wind farm. So we'll have a bit of a look at that.
To achieve the unrealistic targets set by the government, we are in a headlong, chaotic, ad hoc and random rollout of industrial-scaled energy projects. This may deliver stranded assets and a duplication of energy systems. This is what Andrew Dyer, Australian Energy Infrastructure Commissioner, reported in his recent report to the federal government. Here, surrounding the townships of Oberon, Trunky Creek, Baraga, Black Springs and hard up against Abercrombie National Parks, Canangra Boyd National Park and Jenolan Caves, hundreds of wind towers are planned, towering to 300 metres in height. The Paling Yards wind farm is proposed in a picturesque region encapsulated by national parks either side. It will consist of 47 turbines. The Pines wind farm is currently in planning stage and will consist of most likely a couple of hundred turbines, with a maximum blade tip height of 300 metres high. It will cover Gurnang State Forest, Vulcan State Forest and Mount David State Forest. This is what is happening right now in Queensland at the Clark Creek Wind Farm and Caban Wind Farm. Vast earth moving is required for temporary infrastructure, all reliant on new transmission, expensive short-lived batteries, new pumped hydro schemes, and an additional fleet of new gas turbine plants for when all this fails.
Yeah, quite heartbreaking, isn't it? Okay. Yeah. Let's have a look at the wind farm power capacity. Okay. Now, the current stored capacity of wind turbines is 5% of our current grid, or our total national energy supply, but that makes up 35% of the renewable supply sector. Rainforest Reserves Australia, which is Stephen Nalkowski's company or organisation, has currently mapped 4,178 existing turbines and a further 17,908 have been proposed. It's estimated tens of thousands of kilometres of additional upgrade transmission lines will be needed, and these things add to our power bill, which I think Alan Moran will actually highlight later on, apart from the other subsidies that these things also get. So will renewables pass the Oberon pub test? Well, efficiency is claimed to be 37% by the manufacturers, but the real world efficiency is shown to be actually less than 23%. 23% is quite generous. This equates to about 1.6 days out of the 7 they actually generate their rated capacity. So what do we do for the other 5.4 days? You know, if we look at the latest Australian Energy Market Operators report, or quarterly report, which is Q2 24, it shows that wind output has reduced by 20%. That's the same period of Q2 compared to the Q2 of 2023. And in that time, we've actually commissioned a lot more wind farms. So how can power generation be predicted, let alone be reliable? And again, in that same period, we've also noticed there's 18% decrease in hydro generation. And we also even get sort of, I guess, years of wind drought too, which can last for months. So again, how can everything be predicted? So let's have a look at wind turbines and how they work. Okay, blades ideally rotate between 10 to 20 revolutions per minute. Anemometers, which are found on the back of the cell, which is that box in the back of the wind turbine, measure wind speeds and adjust the pitch of the blades to try and keep it within that 10 to 20. Wind vanes turn the turbine's head into the wind via the yaw motors underneath the actual wind head. And the multi-stage gearboxes maintain the generator speed within about 1500 RPM. And that's all to do with synchronising it to the grid, and they use electrical phase lock looping systems to keep it all phase locked. So if we look at the power curve of a wind turbine, we can see that the Goldilocks speed is about 45 kilometres an hour, which is the green zone 3 area, and the minimum starting speed is about 14 kilometres an hour, and the maximum wind speed is about 90 kilometres an hour, and anything above that, the wind turbine needs to be shut down, otherwise it'll just spin itself to bits. And if we look at the structures of the wind system, the generator produces a 3000 volt AC signal, which is synchronised to the grid, or AC voltage. This voltage is then fed to a step-up transformer, which is number 2 there, you can see on the diagram, typically found at the base of the transformer, and that boosts the voltage about 133,000 volts AC. And from there it goes underground to a substation, and that's further amplified to 500,000 volts and fed to the extra high voltage lines that are going southwest of Oberon. So how safe are these wind towers? Well, each wind tower contains approximately 400 litres of gearbox oil. Mechanical failures in gearboxes, braking systems and electrical systems cause catastrophic fires. The most common cause of a turbine fire are lightning strikes, and these can result in burning turbine blades being thrown of a distance of up to 1 kilometre, causing forest fires. Installed lightning protection systems offer moderate protection to minor strikes, but won't be able to shunt a 1 billion volt direct hit away from the gearbox and electrical systems. Other issues with the turbines are turbines in Tasmania, as an example, were fitted with identified camera technology, a cutting-edge avian detection system to stop wind turbines when birds approach. Unfortunately, they did not work as designed. They were too slow to react, and some of the small birds slipped through the net, so to speak. To avoid wind farms, birds have altered their migration patterns. I think I'd do the same if I was a bird. Anyway, turbines also require their own flashing red lights and transponders to ensure safe navigation of aircraft, as they can be almost, as we know, 300 metres in height. Okay, let's have a look at solar. Now, solar power peaks at midday, which is everyone's basically at work at midday, far away from the peaks demands of early morning and evening. Now, heavy overcast days, solar produces less than 10% of their rated power. And this gives solar an efficiency of around 18%, which is actually less than wind turbines. If we look at the harvesting of power, in midwinter, we only have effectively 3 hours. In summer, 6 to 7 hours. The efficiency of a panel drops about 0.3% every degree above 23 degrees Celsius. So in summer, panel heat can reach up to about 70 degrees, which drops the panel efficiency by about 20%. And solar panels are also prone to grime contamination, snow blanketing and hail damage, again, which affects their performance. So if we look at types of storage, since wind turbines and solar are weather-dependent intermittent power sources, they need a form of storage to fill in the gaps of energy shortage. Now, if we don't have some sort of storage, then these wind turbines need to be shut down, and the inverters for the solar farms need to be shut down as well. So an example here, we'll look at a 250 megawatt lithium battery storage facility in Brendale, Queensland, which cost about $2.5 billion and can supply 1 million homes for less than 2 hours. Yeah, and these batteries will need to be replaced every 10 to 15 years. And on top of that, there's also a 15% wastage, you could say, because as you charge a battery and you discharge a battery, it creates heat. These things need to have air conditioning inside to keep them maintained at their ideal working temperature. So they're parasitic in a way, and you lose around about 15%. Fire dangers, environmental impacts of lithium mining and long-term availability is also a concern. Let's have a look at pumped hydro storage. Now, this project started off, or Snowy 2.0, was costed at $2 billion back in 2018 by Malcolm Turnbull. Now, it has now reached about $12 billion plus. I believe there's the tunnel boring machine is stuck in one of the tunnels. I don't know if they've got that out yet. So who knows what the cost could go up to. But that aims to connect actually 2 existing dams in the snow with tunnels. Excess power generated by wind and solar sources during the day may be used for pumping water up the hill onto the top dam. It is then released to provide hydropower for evening and morning peak periods when it's needed. Unfortunately, periodic droughts dampens its effectiveness. Another issue is the transmission lines needed are estimated to cost around about $14 billion, estimated, who knows, and will permanently scar the undisturbed surrounding national park. Yeah. Okay, end-of-life decommissioning. Solar panels, in the end, end up in landfill due to lower cost and lack of recycling availability. So heavy metals in solar panels, namely lead, arsenic and cadmium, will leach from the cells into the groundwater when buried. Wind turbines cost around about between $400,000 to $600,000 to decommission. And whilst we can actually recycle the metal components of a wind turbine, the turbine blades, which can measure up to about 90 metres in length, are mostly buried and cannot be recycled. The 1,200-tonne concrete encased, steel base is left behind in the ground, and the only way to get rid of that is just to detonate it out of the ground. Now the resin used in the turbine blades is called a thermoset chemical composition, and that's a hardened plastic composition, and which is chemically different to the recyclable thermoplastics, the plastic bottles that we use, and it makes it virtually impossible to melt down and reuse. Each 20 to 50 tonne composite turbine blade is made up primarily of epoxy resins, which contains 30 to 40% of bisphenol A. Now, BPA is an endocrine or hormone disruptor, and it has been linked to about 80 diseases, including cancers, reproductive disorders. And these things shed. The other thing is, as they spin over their time, they degrade and they start shedding this throughout the countryside. So that's another concern. In 2012, the WHO warned that endocrine disruptors pose a global threat to public health. So can wind and solar provide stable baseload grid power? The simple answer is no. Wind and solar are weather-dependent intermittent power sources. Energy storage facilities have the limitations and are costly, as we've seen. Gaps in renewable power is currently buffered by gas turbine generators. And in the event of instant power demand, power sources with electrical inertia are needed to stabilise the grid. So what's electrical inertia? Well, coal power plants offer electrical inertia. These have giant steam turbines and generators connected to the grid to give this inertia. So when a large load or demand is experienced, it will not drop the grid frequency or voltage. This helps smooth out the sudden increase in demand and also allows grid operators time to add in more power when needed. Now, just on a side note with these coal power plants, I mean, you've seen the demonised photographs of all this smoke billowing out of the smokestacks. That might be the issue. That might be the case in China and maybe India. But here in Australia, we've got what they call scrubbers inside the smokestacks. And what they do is they catch up all the fly ash that comes up through the burning process. Electrostatically, gets attracted to these scrubbers, and then that gets washed down and shipped away. So what comes out of the smokestacks is effectively CO2 and steam. Now, renewables require synchronous condensers, electrical motors with flywheels, on the grid to help provide this electrical inertia, mimicking coal power plants. A synchronous condenser requires continuous excitation power to maintain spin and cooling, which leads to high operational costs and energy losses. They're actually parasitic units on the system. And now we have an ever-increasing intermittent sort of grid of power sources, storage facilities, demand buffers across the country, which creates a nightmare and a headache for grid operators to manage. And if we look at coal power plants around the world, there's about 550 new power plants being built, about 340 been slated in China, 158 have been slated in India, and we're told to shut down the remaining, 18 we have here in Australia. And lastly, if we look at coal consumption, worldwide, it's been going up on a 45-degree trajectory. We've had a bit of a hiccup, I guess, through COVID, but I guess the hypocrisy of it all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. We've had two great speakers now, so if you have any questions, please see Nicole down the back and write them down. Keep the questions coming for the Q&A later on. Now, our next speaker is a good friend of mine, Mr. Paul Vallejo. Now, Paul is an aerospace and nuclear engineer who spent a decade at NASA. Now, before you get too excited, he does believe we went to the moon, so don't hit him with that question. Paul has become a vocal advocate for nuclear energy and has become a sought-after expert for his expertise on several podcasts, independent media networks, and he recently hosted the nuclear panel of experts at the 2024 Environment and Energy Forum at DYRSL. Please welcome Paul Vallejo.
Nuclear power, safe, reliable, banned. At the beginning of this discussion, we need to understand what game is being played, and it's not an honest game. This is a game of telling stories, and they're not in your best interest. Scientists who are off script get deplatformed, skeptical media gets set aside, and inconvenient data gets manipulated. We are being lied to at scale by our institutions. There's a big difference between the scientific method and narrative science. The scientific method tests hypotheses to try to get data that improves human knowledge. Narrative science, what that does is they only cite studies and data that support the conclusion. They confuse scientific consensus with data. They launch ad hominem attacks at people and scientists, calling people science deniers. And they use appeals to authority. Real science doesn't argue from conclusions. It invites falsification. It wants to learn. And it collects and argues the data and not people's credentials. Narrative news is the source where basically this information gets cycled into the public knowledge, but it only echoes the talking points of powerful interests. They find experts, that only the experts that will the story they want to tell. Just like green energy. Green energy is a narrative. In actuality, as Tony and others will show, there's very little green about it. And the counter-narrative, the green counter-narrative, is not shown. There's also a nuclear narrative and a nuclear counter-narrative. Before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering from the University of Virginia. I had a concentration in nuclear engineering and aerospace engineering. I have 2 other science degrees. I worked at the Space Center for 10 years. One of the things that we worked on there is studying the reliability and safety of nuclear rockets. One thing that's important to realize when it comes to nuclear energy is how fundamentally different an energy source they are. In terms of energy density, this makes all the difference. Everything we see around us, from the food we eat, to the lights, to the petrol in our car, that's all chemical energy. Energy that gets released when the electron shells change inside the atom. Nuclear energy is what we get from the sun or from the nuclear power plants, where with the sun, nuclei combine and fusion, and that releases a great deal of energy. And in the power plants, atoms split, and that releases energy. Now, how different are these sources? In terms of energy density, this is in megajoules per kilogram. Chemical energy is between 10 and 100 megajoules per kilogram. Anything from burning firewood to burning natural gas. Nuclear energy is between 1 million and 10 million megajoules per kilogram, and just absolutely enormous gap in terms of energy density. Other than low cost, what do you want out of your energy supply? One thing you want is to not rely on foreign supply lines, right? We have everything we need here to survive and prosper. When it comes to nuclear fuel, uranium and thorium, those are the two fuel cycles that you can use. Australia is the nuclear fuel superpower of the world, with the top uranium reserves and the third largest thorium reserves. Typically in our nuclear energy plants, we use uranium, mostly for historical reasons, because the first bombs were built out of uranium, and that created, enriched uranium and then plutonium, but that's the uranium fuel cycle. And that's why we have a history of using uranium. So typically our nuclear reactors are uranium fueled. On the other hand, there are so-called renewables come from typically overseas sources, making us reliant, if we depend on these things, from our supply lines, sometimes from strategic competitors. For instance, windmill magnets that you need in order to run the windmills requires rare earth magnets that come from China. As talked about before, the cobalt typically comes from the Congo, often in slave labor. The other thing you want out of your power is base load power. Wind and solar give you fluctuating output. Demand, though, has to be met all times of day, every day. Nuclear can provide base load power, rain or shine. Wind and solar have gaps, and when the economy will fall through those gaps, who wants to party like it's 1699? Candlelight dinners sound romantic, but what about hospitals, freezers, public transports, traffic lights? The next thing you want to know about your power is it safe on the production side and the disposal side? A lot of times people judge nuclear by old designs. The Fukushima accident, 3 Mile Island, these plants were designed in the 60s, built in the 70s. And this is what our telephones looked like at those times, right? Very different. This was 50 years ago. And in order to compare it fairly to wind and solar, let's look at what power generation of wind and solar was like back in that time. There was none. So we need to compare modern technologies to modern technologies. Let's talk a little bit about radiation. First of all, you can't avoid it. It is part of the natural world. Natural sources of radiation are everywhere, from the uranium in our soil to cosmic rays, and even in essential nutrients. Because 120 parts per million of potassium is potassium-40, which is radioactive. So there's something called a banana equivalent dose. You get 0.1 microsieverts of radiation for every banana you eat. Okay. So in this chart, every little square represents 0.05 microsieverts. Eating one banana gives you 0.1 microsieverts. An average daily dose of radiation gives you 10 microsieverts. So you have some sense of the natural radiation that you get every day. If you combine all the blue squares on the left, that equals 3 green squares, about 60 microsieverts. But I want to just highlight 2 things. One is the very bottom box, which is your normal background radiation that everyone gets every year on average, which is 3.6 millisieverts. The maximum external dose from the 3 Mile Island accident was about a third or a fourth of that, at 1 microsievert. Radiation emitted from somewhere on the outside of you, we live with it every day. And like I said, it's part of the natural process and even part of your nutrition. Nuclear is already the safest way to make reliable electricity. What happens when atoms split? There are 4 possible emissions that come out. You get alpha particles, beta particles, neutrons, and gamma rays. What are gamma rays? Gamma rays are basically very high energy X-rays. It's part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which also includes light. When neutrons split atoms, that's actually how the reactor cycle works. One neutron hits a uranium-235 atom, splits it, releases other neutrons, and that is the chain reaction that creates the power. Radiation is not really hard to shield. Alpha particles can be stopped by a piece of paper, beta particles by a thin film of aluminum foil, lead can stop gamma rays, water and concrete can stop neutrons. So the key thing is, as long as it is an external source, like I would live happily by a nuclear reactor. As long as it has adequate passive safety systems, I'm going to get far more radiation from the natural environment. Why is it important to have passive safety systems? Well, what you need is, as long as you don't have a critical meltdown, then nuclear power is almost unlimited safe power. Active safety needs outside intervention. We don't want to have reactors that rely on external power in order to keep cool. And if I had my way, I would replace every nuclear reactor in the world with passive safety systems. So the difference between passive safety, which needs intervention, active safety, which needs intervention, passive safety doesn't require you to do anything. How does that work? Well, it relies on physics in order to be safe. So if you look at this dam, what happens when the water level will rise too much? Does anyone need to run around with their hair on fire? No, the water just drains naturally right into the spillway. An example of how this would work with the nuclear reactor is the freeze plug. So the freeze plug keeps the fissile material and the reactor going, but if external power gets cut off, something goes wrong, the grid fails, the windmills burst into flames, and now you don't have power coming to your reactor. Well, then the freeze plug melts, the nuclear fuel dumps into the dump tank, it's no longer critical, and it cools without incident. The AP1000 plant that is proposed by Peter Dutton is what they call a Generation 3+ power plant, 1,100 megawatts, with 72 hours of passive safety. Basically, if it loses any external intervention, for 72 hours, no one needs to do anything. And by that point, the power cools to less than 1% of normal power. After that, you need to get the water flowing, which you can do with diesel engines. I'm going to skip this slide for time. Modern Generation 4 advanced reactors, so one of the difference between Generation 3 and Generation 4 is a couple of things. One is they call them fast reactors because they don't slow down the neutrons in order to work. And what you can get out of that is you can actually consume more waste than you produce. So one of the things, some of the radioactive isotopes that are a little bit hard to store, you can basically break those down further by splitting them with neutrons so that they are safe and not a problem much quicker than other high-level waste. You can also destroy weapons-grade material, and you can have passive safety systems and very high power levels. Next up, environmental safety. So here I'm going to take just a moment for a little personal story. One of the things you may ask yourself is, what's a boy from the Bronx doing here 12,000 miles away talking about nuclear energy? And the key thing is, I'm here because I love Australia and I love nature. How I got here is a winding road. I've been to 50 countries. It's been quite a journey. And one of the things you might realize about New York is it's not really known for its natural beauty. There are people there who haven't seen the horizon in decades. It's also not known for its politeness. Like here, I put on my turn signal, and the turn signal works. And people give a hand wave. In New York, we use a different hand signal. Right? But, the thing is, I came here, I love the culture, I love the natural beauty. I thought this was I was very grateful to raise my kids here. And so when I see what's happening with the net zero plan, with our bushland, with our farms, people have to speak up. And that's why I'm here, doing what I can, and thank you for being here and doing what you can. Thank you. The great thing about energy density when it comes to nuclear is that because it is such a dense power source, one pinky's worth of fuel can power your life for 10 years. A Coke can's worth, I don't really like Coke, some other drink that, about that size will power your life for a lifetime. Okay, that's how little waste gets produced when we can use nuclear energy. On the other hand, wind and solar, green energy, needs lithium. Because nothing says, I care for the planet like a battery-powered car. Cobalt for our batteries. Silica mines in China causing silicosis, cancer, for our solar panels. Also, on the recycling side, the idea of recycling this green energy is also a fantasy, as pointed out by the windmill blades or the solar panels. What are we going to do with the megatons of toxic trash? The only thing that recycles well in green energy is narratives, stories, like the Maldives is going to go underwater, which they say every few years. And then in 2020, they built 5 new airports. As far as land use goes, as discussed before, far more efficient is the nuclear energy footprint, or even coal. So one other last really pretty amazing lie about net zero is that we export 200 million tons of thermal coal to be used for cheap, reliable energy overseas. Okay? That can generate 500 terawatt hours. We consume 250 terawatt hours. And we're looking to replace our cheap, reliable domestic coal, which gets burnt by someone cheaply, just not us. Okay, we're looking to replace that with unreliable, toxic wind and solar, foreign, farm-destroying, bankrupting, koala-killing. What we export gets used, and it's about 9 cents a kilowatt hour. What we currently have is electricity around 20 cents a kilowatt hour. I personally pay 40 cents a kilowatt hour. So there is really only two I mean, this is off the scale hypocrisy. There are only two really ways to get to net zero. And I don't recommend getting to net zero. I agree with Professor Plimer. But if you are going to do it, you can do it with nuclear energy, which does not have carbon emissions, right? That's one way to do it. Oh, and one thing to keep in mind, who benefits from this silly net zero plan? Asia. They get to burn our resource cheaply and then export to us, create dependence for us on unreliable power. It's good for them. It's not good for us. But the other way, other than nuclear energy, the other way to create net zero is what we do is we take half of the energy that we send to Asia, right, and turn it right back around, put it right back in our own ports, where we can use our own reliable, domestic, and inexpensive energy, and that is actually net zero. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Vallejo. That was excellent. Just want to point out now the Light newspaper. Now, our next speaker, Dr. Alan Moran, is published in this. Also, Senator Malcolm Roberts, Senator Ralph Babette, and even I'm published in there, so it must be good. The point I'm bringing this up is we have a whole bunch of these copies just over on the table over there. These are free for all of you. So if you want to take a copy, or if you want to take a whole pallet and letterbox them in your area, please do so. So it's completely up to you if you want to take us up on that. But please support the Light newspaper. It's a good way of getting information out there, especially with a lot of censorship going around on social media and other places at the moment. Our next speaker, Dr. Alan Moran, is a prominent economist who has analysed and written extensively on economics. He has authored submissions to parliamentary and regulatory bodies on energy and the environment, and he has published several books and written extensively for The Spectator Australia and other Australian media. His website, stopthesethings.com, provides the truth about the great wind power fraud, with a tagline which I really like: "We're not here to debate the wind industry, we're here to destroy it." Please welcome Dr. Alan Moran.
Thanks, Stephen. Many people, probably most people here, are disturbed about the issue of energy from the point of view of the visual intrusion, the land-hungry facets, etc., of wind farms and solar panels, and of course the transmission networks that they require. And I think those concerns should have been amplified by Premier Chris Minns, who's confirmed that the remediation costs of disused wind and solar facilities may fall, in fact he said really will fall, upon the landowner, because unlike other activities, the sponsors of the wind farms and the solar farms don't need to post remediation bonds, so they'll go broke. So there's, in terms of that sort of agitation, the sort of things that are concerning a lot of people, there is a considerable body of people fighting back. The Kilkevin group, run or at least sponsored, fronted by Katie McCullum, has got various things about let's rethink renewables. And she's actually gotten some funding, and she's got hoardings up on the roads in rural areas with depicting some of the damage that renewables do. And I think that's important to get some of a groundswell against them. From my point of view, this isn't kind of my area. That's not my area. My area really is the fundamental issue being the destruction of the economy and living standards from the policies, especially those being pursued by the ALP over recent years, but the coalition's also involved. The bottom line is exemplified by this curve, which I think you'll see elsewhere, and that is the rise in the relative price and the price generally of electricity and gas, which we've seen over the past dozen years, and they've departed from general rise in expenditure and prices. The heart of this has been the price of electricity from the generator. That's gone from less than $50 a megawatt hour 10, 15 years ago to $150 right now, and it will become even stronger. And in addition to that threefold increase at the generator sector, we're seeing a much bigger increase, or an amplified increase, from the need to firm up these intermittent renewables and to ensure that the market can operate with them. Now, all this kind of started with this confected fear about CO2, which we've discussed already. Ian Plimer has discussed how it is confected. And as a result of that fear, governments in Australia have embarked on a progressively more intensive war, essentially a war against coal-generated electricity and against coal itself. And they started quite small, these measures. We started back, and it was John Howard, who was a fairly decent guy, but his idea was that he was going to throw a stop to this issue, and he brought in something called renewable energy target, which said that 2% of additional energy, electricity, had to be wind or solar. 2% of additional, so it was relatively small. It was a nuisance factor. But, time marches on, and with that SOP, they required ever more. It's almost like, feeding a hungry fish, which every gulp it takes, it demands another one straight away. And so but there was no fear at that stage, basically, in the general public. Everybody assured us that, within a few years, all these renewables are going to be cheaper than coal, cheaper than these fossil fuels. This subsidy we were putting on was just getting us over a hump. They'll all have expired within 20 years, and we'll be standing on its own 2 feet. The government's just giving us, accelerating a progression that's already in place. And what has happened in terms of the profile of Australian energy? It's gone from about 80% coal, and about the rest being gas and hydro, to 60% coal, and we've now got 25% solar and wind, which didn't exist at all 20 years ago, and a bit of hydro and a bit of gas. So here's the pattern we have right now. And you can see it's actually a progression that's alarmingly continuing, and that is the objective. The objective is that blue line at the top will intersect at zero, eventually, perhaps by 2050, perhaps earlier. So, and this has actually created a considerable amount of change in the profile of our energy, as we saw from an earlier graph, that a lot of this energy gets produced during the peak days or at this time of the day, and none of it, of course, for solar at night, and wind also tends to be mainly during the daytime. According to the government and its advisors, we're only just getting started in terms of this progression. Australia needs to install 16 times as much of the current capacity of batteries and pumped hydro by 2050. Of course, there's only one possible real pumped hydro scheme, which is Snowy, which is already costing us probably $30 billion as opposed to the $2 billion it was supposed to cost. There's really no others, even though they're talked about. And so we're basically we're going to have these things jump by twofold. Here's the situation simply to 2030, and we've got a doubling in the next 5 years, which means a fourfold expansion from the pace at which we've been going at, allegedly, to get to where we plan to get to by 2030, and that's just one stage. I got to say beforehand that there's no possibility, there's no wind or solar installation, to my knowledge, and I've been around this for 20 years, to my knowledge, anywhere in the world that's been produced without subsidies. In other words, they all require subsidies, and the subsidies are getting dearer and dearer, the need for them. This is a chart, I won't go into it because we're short of time a bit, but basically it shows the absurdity of the subsidies that we do have, the nature of them. Some of them effectively require, those on EVs, a subsidy of about $1,000 per tonne of CO2, which is allegedly prevented. Some of them are about 1/10 of that, $10 or $100, less than that, in terms of the emission reductions that they make. But we've basically got a plethora of different taxes that are required in here. This basically summarises them in three sorts of taxes that we have. First of all, we've got requirements that certain levels of electricity, energy, be from the renewable sector, be part of the retailer's total supply. And those things are called the renewable energy targets, which is the expansion of John Howard's original one, and then there's one on rooftops, and there's other things, there's some state schemes as well. They're about $5.3 billion every year we're spending on those. Then there's some facilitative things to actually make them work. We've got to have a renewable trader to actually buy power, because it's obviously not very reliable otherwise. We've got the clean energy regulator who handles all the subsidies. We've got new transmission. And those sort of things cost about $1.7 billion. Then we've got the taxpayer-funded things, which are growing very rapidly. They're $9,000 million per annum at the present time, and it all comes to $16,000 million every year. That's basically what we're spending every year, and this shows in a little bit more detail some of those costs. But a big one that we've got recently, or two big ones we've been introduced by the Albanese government, is something called the safeguard mechanism, which is an additional tax on the top 200 firms, and they have to reduce their emissions by 5% every year, and they do this by buying Australian carbon credits, which started off as being trees, if you like, or perhaps even carbon burial in soils, but essentially are just retiring farmland, buying up the farmland, letting it go fallow, which has got a double jeopardy effect, of course, anyway. And this additional tax, which was very quickly brought in by the Albanese government, is another $900 to $1 billion every year. But they really are now getting going with these taxes and imposts, because they've now given up on the subsidies through the requirements, actually driving what they want, which is to kill off coal altogether. So they have now got something called a capacity investment scheme, which they said was going to firm up the renewables, make them work a bit better, but it's almost all of it is the government buying on our behalf more and more renewable energy, offshore, onshore. Basically, they're buying that. They say they're going to de-risk this to the investors. So the government is going to give them a certain price. Of course, de-risking to one party means posing the risk on the other party, and we're the other party. And this is now running. It's a $68 billion scheme. They've been quite taciturn in saying what it's going to mean for everyone, but they've said it's going to be $68 billion. Almost everyone sees at least half of the cost of this is going to fall on the taxpayer themselves, and we're talking there something like $5 billion or more a year as part of this system. So over the years then, what we've seen is that this is 2006, John Howard's sort of small step, $400 million a year, what it was going to cost, is increased by and large. I mean, Tony Abbott tried at some stage to arrest it, but you can see he did not succeed at all. But one thing that did happen is with the Albanese government, the thing has been turbocharged. It's gone from 9.6 to $16 billion a year, $16,000 million a year, as a result of the schemes that are in there. These sorts of numbers, actually, you won't see on government websites. They actually don't publish them. They tell you all about it. Of course, they have to tell you what is being planned and what is being costed, but they never consolidate them, and they won't consolidate them. They give very glossy brochures, and they've got lovely wavy lines about how we're going down in coal and we're going up in renewables and things, and all sorts of stirring words, but there's no hard data. Sorry, sir. Yeah.
Could I just ask a question? That is very alarming, these numbers.
Yeah.
Do you have an extrapolation going forward what those numbers could look like?
No, but they'll certainly go higher. The thing about it is that you can, when you start off small, as John Howard did, it's easy to do. If you're just doing that, it's little bits and pieces. But the more you go up, the more costly it is. Even though the price of the renewable energy itself doesn't increase, or it may even decline if you get more efficient, it gets harder and harder to control it. Nuclear renewable energy, if it's 2%, it comes in and out of the grid. It doesn't create that much difficulty. But when it gets to 20%, you've got to do an awful lot of things to fortify it so that it can be 24/7, and that means batteries, and it means buying forward things, and it means a lot more transmission. Anyway, so that's where it's gone to. I don't know where it's going to go higher. I would have been astonished if even 10 years ago if you'd have said it was going to be 16 billion compared to the 2 billion it was then. It was horrendous then. And although they don't give the cost of these subsidies, they are fully offering costs or pretending to offer costs of what the alternatives are. Indeed, when the opposition was suggesting they wanted to go nuclear, Mr. Bowen said, that's going to cost $387 billion. It's a lot of money. Of course, it's not an awful lot. It's a lot less than is being likely to spend on his policy. But even that was a gross exaggeration. In the vice president of Western Electric quipped that she's got 3 engineering degrees, and that does not make sense to me. And she put the cost at about a third of this for nuclear. But of course, I'd have to say, to get to that cost, that lowish cost that she suggests, we'd have to do an awful lot in terms of relaxed regulation of nuclear, because it's massively over-regulated. The Americans are actually sending suggesting they're going to reduce the regulatory imposts in America. Korea produces nuclear power stations at about a quarter of the cost of those in Europe and things now, and Korea's got a very good safety record. So, in terms of what this drives, we've got this 16 billion, which is the support, but it drives a lot of other things. We're actually trying to get to the aggregate level of spending in the economy. It's not only the subsidies, it's what's being forced to be spent as a result. And you can add some of these up. The generator facilities, the wind and the solar that it's driving, is about $10 billion. The batteries and the sequestration through the carbon units is about $3 billion. Then we've got the EV sales, electric vehicle sales. It's likely that some electric vehicles would be sold anyway, but basically they're being pushed by the very high levels of subsidies. Then we've got the subsidies to the EV support battery facilities around the country. And this brings us to this level of about $36 billion a year. $36 billion a year we're spending. That is $720 billion over the next 20 years, and it's equivalent to about 10 or 11 or 12% of the kind of investment spending that we have. That's the non-housing investment expenditure, private expenditure, which is the very expenditure which drives our living standards. Without investment expenditure, we'd gradually sink to, well, Stone Age type living standards. But even then, you know, some of these costs are rather fanciful. They're understated, some of the costs of renewables. We have a very well-regarded consultancy called Global Rome, which is not anti-renewables by any means. In fact, they make most of their money by consulting to renewable industries. But they've developed the costs of the batteries on the basis that we have a vastly expanded transmission system. They suggested looking at holistically at the whole of Australia for a non-coal renewable system would require battery backup for the equivalent of 70,000 Hornsdale, that's a big Tesla batteries in South Australia, 70,000 of them, and the cost of that is $6.3 trillion. Now, $6.3 trillion, let me just put that in perspective, because there's an awful lot of numbers coming out here. The GDP, our GDP is about $2 trillion. In other words, it's 3 times GDP we've got to spend on these batteries and before we start putting the generators in. It's 3 times that, and 3 times that the batteries don't just go in and stay in. It's not like 3 times and they last for 100 years like a nuclear plant or even a coal plant. They go in, they stay in, and they have to be replaced every 10, 12 years. You can work it out. So it's 1/3 of GDP we've got to spend just to keep this new form of energy, this new improved, so-called improved energy in place. And, you know, 1/3 of GDP means we lose 1/3 of our incomes. We're all 1/3 poorer for an energy system which is inferior to the one that we're steadily destroying. Basically, so compared to that, if we actually if we went coal instead and we've got about 22 gigawatts of coal at the present time. If we replace that, or if we doubled it for 2050, we'd be talking about a cost of about a third, a quarter of the costs that we're actually contemplating with a renewable system, which probably won't work in any case. And, one way of the future is taking a lead from China. I mean, here's China. Basically, they do have a fair amount of solar energy because they're selling to the rest of the world. But basically, there's their energy choices between fossil fuels and solar and wind, and fossil fuels, which is coal and gas for them, is about 70% of their grid, which is probably what we would have if we were sensible. One of the U.S. Vice Presidential hopeful, J.D. Vance, is also contesting this, as is Trump, the renewable things across the U.S. Vance has said, well, look, electricity costs as a result of these renewable, Inflation Reduction Act, it's called. It's a crazy name for what the US subsidies are. Because of this act, the IRA have risen by 30% in price. They're going to rise another 30% next year. And he says net zero in the US is stifling investment in coal, nuclear and natural gas. But, you know, we're much further along the road than the US. We're twice as vulnerable. We're spending twice as much per capita. I think the thing about it is that it's not only that we're spending all this money on renewables. Some of the effects of this is really on what it entails in terms of the costs to the economy as a whole, and one aspect of this is the GDP. But if we just look at what it's actually meant for us in the past, in the recent past, we're the orange one in the middle there. The Europeans are still higher than us in terms of their energy prices, but you know we're roughly twice the US and twice of Canada, much higher than China and Taiwan, etc. We were right down at the bottom end of that. We were just about the cheapest 20 years ago. It's not very long ago. 20 years ago, we were just about the cheapest in the world, and we could be there again, but we're steadily trying to dismantle it. And the implications of that is just not just that it's costing us a lot of money, it's destroying the economy. If we look here, this is what the Productivity Commission has been estimating, looking at productivity. We saw in Australia with deregulations from about the 1990s, a little bit earlier, for the next till the early 2010s, a vast increase in productivity. We got a lot wealthier. We reduced the size of government. We privatised a lot of things. We reduced a lot of the tariffs, for example, on cars and things. We got a lot and we can see it in this graph. All this part here in the left-hand side of the graph there basically we got richer. Productivity was surging. It actually started flagging about 10 or 15 years ago, especially because we started substituting cheap for dear energy, and we went down. We've now reached a situation, the latest data, where not only has it flagged, but it's going negative. We're actually poorer. We often think of ourselves as poorer, but we are. The data shows us to be poor. It fell 2.7% last year, and it's likely to fall in future years as well. We're losing a lot of our really more efficient industries, the smelting industries. These were the industries which made Australia very highly competitive. We're losing those industries, and we're likely to lose more of them. One of the facets of that loss is not only the subsidies, not to renewables, not only the increased amounts of regulation generally, but the kind of war that's associated with NGOs, many of which are financed by the government, with the judiciary, which is preventing the development of projects and slowing them down and decreasing the will of investors to put their money forward, knowing that it's vulnerable to things. We're seeing all that sort of thing happen. The Santos development in Narrabri, for example. We got a certain amount of remission because we had all this vast increase. This is gross investment, massively associated with mining. This great big peak of investment in mining that occurred from about 2010, and we're living off that now. We're prosperous because of that now, but it's gone down and it's staying down, and it's likely to stay down as a result of the government's increase in regulations, etc. It's staying down, and as a result of that, the sort of age of our capital investment, capital is actually declining. It's gone from the average age from 11 to 13 years in manufacturing, 7 to 10 in mining, and so on. All of this means that we are less productive as an economy. And the investment we're actually really disinvesting at the present time as a result of the substitution of productive coal generation from others. So where do we go? Well, you know, if we ever do recognise the folly of where we are going at the moment, it's going to be difficult to change because there's a lot of vested interest in maintaining existing policies. We got renewable energy firms, traders, and those involved in installing batteries and transmission lines. They'll campaign and challenge any attempt to change the policies. And so too will those who've extracted lengthy contracts from the assurances of governments. The union-controlled and other superannuation funds are heavily invested in this renewable energy, and they will complain bitterly if the subsidies go down, and they'll bring forward many of us here who've got superannuation funds, they'll claim that we'll be poorer as a result if the government ceases the subsidies. So I'm not sure. It's a very difficult process once in train. And the gentleman asked the question there was, you know, how do we project it? You know, once in train, these things are very, very difficult to reverse. And, you know, we could end up in some horror show like the 100-year that Argentina faced. I mean, Argentina was about as prosperous as Australia 100 or more years ago, and it increased. It went far further with regulations and excessive size of government than we did, and you know, is now a third world country. And there's no guarantee that we can stay prosperous, and certainly it's very likely we won't do. And we can see the continuing, the Albanese government basically being quite hostile to new investment, and almost flippant. You know, the recent Regis gold mine, not very far away from here, being canned by Minister Plimer, even though she puts a whole lot of barriers in place for any new development. It passes all the barriers, and the minister sort of capriciously says, well, you know, she's going to put another one in there, and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back in that case. We've actually got, you know, the greatest the greatest unlockable natural wealth in the world per capita in Australia, no question about it, in both mineral and agricultural assets. And we could and should have the highest standard of living, but, you know, this is a good living still, but we're living off the fat of some developments over the past 20 years which have been tapering off and declining, and we're already seeing a reduction in aggregate living standards, and, you know, unless we do turn it around, it'll be even worse. Sorry about the bad news.
Thank you, Dr. Moran. That was fantastic. We're going to take 5 minutes now just to stretch the legs and get a drink. Please feel free to get a copy of the Light newspaper and also Professor Plimer's book.
How are you going? My name's Chris. I'm filming the event and I'm asking people why they've come.
Why they've come? Well, I was just interested to hear what was hopefully an unbiased opinion on the whole subject. I mean, I've got to admit some of it actually does reflect what I've suspected all along. Yeah, that a lot of this carbon issue is just myth.
Who did you vote for, or who did you support, or who did you like? How did you get that? Who did you like at the last election?
Okay, last election. It was very difficult for me. I've been a lifelong Liberal supporter, but the last few elections I've been very much a swinger on it. And with what's coming up, I've got to say neither.
Neither.
Well, in fact,
you vote for a third party, or who did you go for?
This is very controversial. I'm almost reaching the point where I'd rather pay a fine than vote for any of them.
So you didn't like anyone?
No.
You didn't feel One Nation reflected your views on...
One Nation does reflect my views, but I just don't see
What about
them ever getting up.
United Australia?
And yeah, I like all of those, but I just can't see them getting to a position of power. That's what's so frustrating.
Liberal Democrats, they have an upper house MP here in New South Wales. Shooters Fishers. I don't know what they're, in your area, because Shooters Fishers
Well, Shooters and Fishers are big here.
And they're a third party. They would, without support, would not have gotten up a long time ago.
No, but the thing is, what I would like to see is another party of the magnitude and power of Liberal and Labor. And I don't know how that's going to happen. Short of us having a civil war or something, I just can't see it.
Dr. Plimer, in his first session, spoke about stopping the trucks and starving the cities out as a form of civil disobedience.
Well, that's one of them.
Yeah? You open to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's one of them.
He spoke about there's only 7 days of food in the cities.
Not in my pantry.
Oh, no, in the cities.
Yeah, I know.
Not even in the pantry. In most people's pantries in the city, I think they have maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Between snacks, really.
Yeah, well, that's right. But I'm a bit of a prepper in that respect, in that I just don't know where the whole thing's going. And in fact, I'm sorry I have young grandchildren.
Let me talk to some more people and come back.
Yeah.
My name's Chris, streamer and Chris Coveries. Thanks for the chat.
I'm Christine.
Hi, Christine. Thank you for the chat. Let me
Okay.
keep moving. Is this your...
That's my grandson.
Looks like he's right in the middle of Fortnite right now. G'day.
This is hi again, Chris. Michael, we met last night. This is my wife Heidi.
Hi, good to
Howdy.
meet you.
Well, hoping I can speak to...
Ray.
Hi, Ray. I'm filming the event and I'm asking people why they've come.
You what?
I'm filming the event
Yes.
and I'm asking people why they've come.
Well, we come to see what we could do about the wind farms and the climate.
Yep.
That's why we're here. And we've been very happy with the people that have spoken so far.
What would you like done about the wind farms?
We'd like them to go, leave forever here.
Why?
Well, they'll ruin the landscape and they'll ruin the tourist attractions of the town. So that's about it.
At the last election, who did you support or who did you like?
Well, 90% of these people here would be Liberal voters.
Of the people in this room or speaking?
Of this room, I would say. And we're actually, these things are really, we're preaching to the converted, really, aren't we?
But last election, did you support? I'm not sure if the Liberals are in the seat. You've got Libs and Nats out here. And things
Yeah,
like
we
that.
got National here.
Nationals. And the Nationals, do you know their policy on net zero?
My word, I do. They're going to have no wind towers and that sort of thing. They're going nuclear, see?
Oh, the Nationals are against wind farms?
Yeah.
And they're against net zero, or?
No, they're not. No one's against renewables or anything. It's just the position they put them in and what we do with them. Like, they're going to wreck Oberon. If there's just one chance in 1 million of the Oberon pine plantations burning, that kills Oberon. We're a timber town. 48% of our population in Oberon works for the timber industry.
And that's linked to net zero because that's... Well, the timber plantations, they soak up carbon, right? Kind of, in a way?
Oh, yeah, not as much as a gum tree, probably.
Oh, okay. Right, because wood is carbon.
Yes,
Wood's
exactly.
carbon, right?
Yes, exactly
so you plant
right.
a tree, it grows, it sucks in carbon.
Yes.
You build a house out of it.
And it lets out oxygen, which we got to breathe.
And that, oh, good. Yeah, that's not net. Yeah. Electric car, Tesla. That's a yeah. But what I was coming to was, Liberal voters. Are you a Liberal voter yourself?
Yes. Well, national.
It's the coalition, isn't it? It's got a coalition. Or shall I stand there too?
It's a coalition.
You know, and what do you think of the Libs on this?
Well, we're in this mess because of law changes that happened under the Liberal National. They brought in state significant infrastructure. They changed the Forestry Act. They introduced the res zones. It's harming people, all through the state, up in New England and the Central West. But recently the Nationals have been really good, and they've been strongly on. They're in opposition now, but I think we have to take them at their word. And if they support us and support Oberon, I'll say thank you, because we can't change the past. Would you agree with that?
I agree totally, yes. We can't change the past, but we shouldn't have to have a future of wind farms in Oberon. That's just it, We have a look out there.
Tell us, what are we seeing?
Have a look. Well, we look on the
area of outstanding natural beauty. The farmlands and forests of Oberon, of the Oberon Plateau.
Pretty windy out there today.
It's a bit windy today, yes. They'd be generating a bit today, not yesterday though. It was no wind yesterday.
Have a look out there at that tower. Well,
Can you hold that for me? And tell me, where am I looking?
There, look, see through that door. You can see them towers out there. They're the lookouts in Oberon.
You've got to guide me here. Can you see my screen? Tell me where I'm going.
Well, you're only on the light. You've got to go that way. And there they are. Look.
Those towers, yep. I'll have a look at them. Give me 1 sec.
Righto, get over.
Oh, okay. It's a long zoom.
Yeah, now you're in there.
Yeah.
So you just imagine they're just there. So you can see them. And if we have 600 wandering around there, three times that high, big white towers with red lights on top, that every night they will flash because every blade has got to go round. So there you are.
Lovely. Thanks, mate. And you don't want that. You want the quiet, you like the dark, you like the...
No. We just want the renewables put somewhere, not in a forest where could burn and could ruin Oberon.
Zali's ruled out Warringah. I mean, we'd love to put them out for Manly, but that's just been ruled out. Sorry.
That's because they're in Parliament, we're not.
Zali is on the crossbench,
yeah.
So she's as much in Parliament as the Nats.
Are you, and what's your personal position on the renewables?
I've come here to try and film it and ask people, because I film lots of reckless renewables protests in Sydney and ask them about it. So this is a chance for me to kind of amplify an audience that just doesn't get to see it.
Yes.
Getting to come here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've always said is that there's a phenomenon called, or movement, environmental equity, which is the people who are demanding and consuming the end product should, wherever possible, bear the harms. So what's happening in Oberon...
We would, but...
So what's happening throughout country Australia is, I believe, it's been disproportionately harmed by a regulatory and legislative environment that totally favours corporations. So they can
cities.
Well, yeah, but favours the corporations.
It does.
It's what I call, they rob from the poor to give to the rich. So you've got these big companies, and they come in, and they got two weapons. They got secret contracts, and they got a fistful of dollars, and they use those dollars to go and sign up people, and they won't let neighbours talk to neighbours. So it's really divisive in rural communities. And I might have wind turbines on my farm, and I might get a lot of money and raise my neighbour, and he'll get nothing. So he's got to bear all the harms and gets none of the money, and to me that's totally unfair. So until the government get there is possibly a way to do this and come into a community and get social licence in communities that want them. But until they get the process right, I'm dead set against it. And it also, as I think some of the speakers said, we dig up 500 million tonne of coal, and no one's got any plans to stop that. So even if Ian Plimer's wrong and there's a climate problem, none of building wind turbines in Oberon will do anything, because we're still digging up and exporting the coal. So the big coal corporations get to rake in billions of dollars, and the renewable companies get to rake in billions of dollars, and the little guys get screwed. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, mate.
If you want to move up closer to the front, you're more than welcome. You might be able to hear a little bit better. I'm not sure. Yeah, just maybe have a look if there's anyone outside. There you go. Perfect. You don't. You don't even need to download the photos now. Did he sign it for you? You got to get him to sign it for you. All right, is everyone ready to go again? Yep. All right. Just want to let you know, some people have been asking, about all the cameras around. They're all going to be up. This recording, this morning's recording, and also this one is going to be on Chris's YouTube channel. So if you want to pull out your phones and subscribe to his channel, it's just the Chris Coveries channel on YouTube. So you'll get a recording of everything that we've done today. I'm going to take a couple of minutes now to give you all a presentation, and it's going to be about some fantastic members of Parliament that we have in Sydney. Now, I'm going to test your knowledge. Can you tell me what each one of these people have in common? Chris Bowen, Tanya Plebiscite, Anthony Albanese, Zali Steggall, Sophie Scamps, Kylie Tink, and Allegra Spender. What do all they have in common? Ignorance. That's one. Not the answer I was searching for, but it's correct. Something else? Any country, yeah, I'll take that. But that's, again, anything else?
Ideologists.
Yeah, that's something, yeah. Hypocrites is a good answer, but no.
Renewables, but not in my backyard.
Well, we're going to get to that. What I was pointing out is they're all in Sydney. Right? So we've got all these politicians in Sydney pushing their ideology, and the consequence is that it's going to be pushed out in your backyard.
Front yard.
Well, front yard, backyard, some people maybe even on top of their properties. Now, if you go to Zali's website and you hit the policy tab, go down to where does Zali stand on, brings up this page here. Now, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you get to solar panels and wind farms in Moringa. Expand on that, and it says, I do not support wind farms along Moringa's beachfront. So we all know that the Teals want to reduce emissions, and they want to do that by 2035, and they want to do that by bringing in wind and solar, but she doesn't want it in her backyard. And she even goes on to say down the bottom here, she says that it's unfortunate that such an important issue as a climate crisis is trivialised by some and reduced to my personal use of solar panels, the car I drive, and a joke petition to put windmills on Manly Beach. Now, I'm sure it's not all a joke for you people out here, and it's certainly not a joke for our next speaker, Mr. Grant Piper. He's the chairman of the National Rational Energy Network, or NREN for short. He lives out in Parkes, the Parkes electorate, which takes up about a third of New South Wales. So they only get one member of Parliament representing them, whereas in Sydney it's congested with a whole bunch of MPs. So unfortunately for Grant, a lot of the struggle for him is going to Sydney and going to different forums in Sydney to speak, to wake people up there of what's happening in his backyard, and also coming out to rural areas like here as well to spread the word, because what he's facing in the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone is almost terrifying. I speak from experience. When your livelihood is threatened by government, it's terrifying, because it's a juggernaut that you have to go up against, and it's a tough battle, but Grant's fighting it. And he's every time that he goes away from his farm, he's having to give up his own time, and valuable time that he shouldn't be giving up. But he's doing it because I'm sure he loves his country. He's a former RAAF pilot, so he served this country in the military, and now he's serving his country now as well. So please welcome Mr. Grant Piper.
Thank you, Stephen. It all sounds flashier than it is, really. But thank you. But yeah, I'm chairing NREN, and it's one of those jobs or tasks that we take on voluntarily, like a few of them. And I'm lucky to have, or we're lucky to have a great team there, and they're all volunteering a lot of time and have a lot of expertise in different areas that I don't have. And that's the important part. Everyone's got different skills. And there's a bunch of competent, intelligent people out there, and if you could just get them on board and give them their head, they'll generally go in the right direction and do the right thing, and it takes not as much management as you'd like, and we're all learning on the go as well. But we've got a bit of a few slides to get through here. I'll try and stay here for Chris so he doesn't have to run up and move the microphone this time. How did we get here? So we all know the gentleman there. You know, he's well dressed, well spoken, much gravitas. He's got the best education, but he's been completely wrong. And that seems to be the way with most cited experts these days, present company excluded. But they all spruik these messages, and they make them sound like you've got no alternative but to comply. And if you don't agree, if you go against that, you're some sort of a nutter, and you're demonised, cancelled, and cast out from society. And that cows everyone into silence. And the one message I want to get through from this talk this afternoon is to have confidence in your life experience, have confidence in the years that you've spent here and the things that you've seen and done. And if that doesn't mesh with what they're telling you, if your reality doesn't mesh with what they're telling you, well, stop and question it. Or, you know, in simple terms, if you see BS, you hear BS, well, have the courage to stand there and call the BS. Don't let it flow through, okay? So that's what I want. We've always got to be critical of what they're being told these days, because a lot of it just doesn't seem to gel up. So, yeah, my background's farmer. I grew up on a mixed farm around Caster's Coolah district, and I went away and did a few things, studied engineering, joined the Air Force and flew, and then we bought land and came back and raised a family. We fought a transgrid line that was going to come across one of our properties back 2019, 2020 with another group that was formed, Merriwa-Caster's Alliance, and we were successful at getting that line pushed south and off the most productive farmland back into an existing easement. We thought we'd won that, and then we turned around and found that there was a wind project we didn't know about to be built on the ridge west of our house, 3.5k from our house. There'd always been, or for a long time, another project north of us that went through without any opposition several years ago, or almost over a decade ago. It had never been built. And we always heard about wind farms and thought, oh, that's that one. But no, there was another one. So with the neighbours up and down the valley in the village of Uabri, we formed the Uabri-Tungi Lane Alliance, and we incorporated, and then we've been combating the local area. We've held sessions in Coolah to educate the community and inform them. And then the Central West Orana res was dropped on us. We realised we were in the middle of a res, or not in the middle, but within a res. And we'd never heard anything about that prior. There was no consultation. I heard about it on the tractor one day, and we looked into that and found that we're in the middle of a res, and so instantly your life is in limbo. What does this mean? You know, as soon as you're in a res, how does that affect your capital value? How does that affect your future plans? What's going to happen? Will they build it? Won't they build it? So we helped a bunch of others in the district and the area form the Central West Resist group in 2023, and then we realised the bigger problem, and the problem was widespread across the whole country, and my wife was on Facebook, and we formed groups there, and we found a lot of other groups around the country, and they were all sort of operating in isolation. We felt in isolation, and we thought there was a need for all these groups to not necessarily unite, but at least collaborate and support each other. And we were toying with that when other people were doing the same thing, and so we had a few meetings. Barnaby Joyce was involved and his staff, and they were under the pump because the ladies in his office were facing wind and solar and power lines, and Barnaby's property had power lines projected to go over it in a New England res. So we threw our lot in with them, and we ended up forming the National Rational Energy Network about 12 months ago now. And I was the only bunny that put my hand up for the top job, so here I am. But fundamentally, I'm happy for somebody else to do the job, but it seems like no one else is going to do it. You've got to do it yourself, and that's the way it is in the country. So we formed NREN, and that's our objectives per our constitution: to protect and advance public welfare and the natural environment by opposing Commonwealth, state or territory law or corporate actions that impose counterproductive energy policies and costs on all citizens. So it's fairly well focused, and it's fairly zero tolerance. These things, if you've heard the previous speakers, they're completely counterproductive, a waste of time, energy, money, and you couldn't think of a worse way to make bulk power if you're ever going to make any. So it's a zero tolerance approach. I mean, a little bit of stupid, you let that through, in a few years' time you've got big stupid, and that's where we are now. So we've really got to nip these things in the bud, and we hope the horse hasn't bolted completely. This gets back to where we are. The Central West Arana Res is that area. The blue lines are prospective power lines in planning. The red ones are further out, and so far the projects are in a spine across the centre of that area, the projected projects, and they've started building some solar, they haven't built any wind, and the transmission haven't quite started either. And you can see coolers up in the northeast corner there. And these are the listed projects. The green blobs are wind, the orange are solar, and again in the northeast corner you'll see cooler sandwiched between those two big green blobs, the Tilt wind farm to the north and east, and the Asen wind farm to the south and west on high country, and coolers in the valley between, and our property where we live is in the valley between, and the Uabri-Tungi Lane is in the valley between. So far it's proved 4.5 gigawatt dispatchable power. They're applying to increase that to about 5.7 and then eventually 8 gigawatt of dispatchable power. There's 54 projects listed so far. If they build all those, there'll be 1,024 turbines, 9 million solar panels, 850 megawatt solar farms, about 25 square kilometres, for a total of 14.6 gigawatt of installed capacity. And there's also multiple BESS projects within that. So that shows the 3-to-1 overbuild, the 4.5 gigawatt dispatchable for 14.6 built, about that 30% capacity factor that's mentioned earlier. The AMO 2022 data was wind at 29% dispatchable and solar was less than 20. I think Alan said 17 or so was the actual number, or the current number. And to put that in perspective, the amount of power we're talking about, they're just big numbers. But New South Wales is the biggest consumer of power in the country, biggest state, and it uses between 8 and 10 gigawatt at all times. So the big toaster of New South Wales draws 8 to 10 gigawatt at any time, yet they want to build 14.6 gigawatt only in the Central West Arana Res. And that's just one res of the 5 in New South Wales. There's in New England, South West, down near Hay, and then there's the 2 offshore reses. So the massive overbuild required to supposedly try and get what we need of 10 gigawatt is incredible, and you can't argue that that's, environmentally, saving in any way whatsoever. I mean, they consume more and produce less power, so to get the same power, we're going to consume more resources ultimately, and that's, you're losing every step of the way. So it's a massive overbuild at cost to the environment and the resource use. Oberon and other places aren't even in the res. There's a bunch of solar and wind everywhere around the state that is outside the reses. So those people that are outside the res that think they're safe, or Paul Toole, I think, said that, we've got to keep all this stuff within the reses. No one's safe. I think the reses are actually a bit of a red herring in a way, in that the people outside think they dodged a bullet, and they don't need to worry about us who are the undermunchen inside the res. We can just suffer ourselves, but no one's going to escape this if it goes ahead. And to further drive home the absurdity of the whole thing, Dubbo is in the middle of the res, surrounded by the 14.6 gigawatt I mentioned, and it's just been approved for Twiggy and Squadron Energy to build a gas turbine. So despite being surrounded by that, they've acknowledged they're still going to be short of power and they need to have a turbine there just in case. It's just absolute absurdity. I think wind and solar is just for the optics and the money go round and to look like you're doing something, and in the background the coal and gas is just going to have to continue to do the hard work, but we don't want to talk about that. It's got absolutely no engineering, economic or environmental benefit. I don't know whether we saw one of these before, I thought we did, but the amount of minerals, like I said, the amount of consumption of resources to generate a piddling amount of power, it's totally counterproductive to the stated aim. And I think that, funnily enough, the beneficiaries of all this will be the resource companies, because they have to dig all these minerals out of the ground and move them around the world. And you've got the commodity trading companies. It doesn't matter whether we're losing, as long as stuff's on ships going backwards and forwards, the commodity trading companies are making money and the traders are making money, and the resource companies dig more stuff out of the ground. But it really doesn't serve us in any efficient way. And just talking about the trading, the national electricity market, I can't remember when it was set up now, but they bid in 5-minute blocks. So in the middle of the day, the price goes negative because there's a heap of solar, and at night it goes through the roof because it all dries up and we don't have much generation capacity left, and they've got to move it across the country on these power lines. And talking about the market, but the market settings is a 5-minute bid. If they were genuine about having reliable power, you'd at least make it a 24-hour bid. So all these intermittent generators actually have to bid for a 24-hour price and supply a 24-hour period at least, and that would be a market setting that might give us a bit of reality. There's probably a dozen other things you could do as well. Our experiences at home, and you're probably facing it now, is we were compulsory acquired to put a 330 line across the corner of one of our places. We didn't sign up in advance. They had to actually go to Valuer General and gazette us, and they did that. But all the negotiation, all the consultation they carry out is just a waste of time. They don't listen, as in they don't pay attention to what you say. They listen, they make the right sounds, they do nothing. And then they come back and nothing's changed. They haven't moved the line left or right, they won't do this, they won't do that. And ultimately, they've always got the gun at your head of compulsory acquisition. And they know that, and they say that quite openly. So we'll drop that little bit for the moment. Something that will concern you down here is the fire risk, obviously, from turbines. We saw some pictures earlier. State forests, the fire risks are a big thing. And this is, and it's all denied by the RFS and in the IPCs and other meetings we've had. You write to them, they don't acknowledge there's a problem, that aerial firefighting will just continue as normal. And I've argued the point that it won't. I've got over 1,000 hours on C-130, which was a large air tanker type that was used in the 2017-2019 fires and the type that crashed in the snowies. And in the 2017 fire around our area that burnt 55,000 hectares, they used DC-10, C-130, the croppies as well as helicopters. And this was a fire earlier our year just up next to our property. This is being filmed from the hill on our property, and the fire was on the neighbour's scrub next door, and it's the 737 tanker. Now, depending on the model, they have between 102 and 120 foot wingspan, and you can look at how low he comes in over the target. You can look at his visibility is crap because of the smoke, and there's probably a lot of turbulence. And looking at where he's dropping at the wingspans, it'd be no more than 200, 250 feet above the target to get the retardant onto the target. Now, you can't tell me that an 850, 900 foot turbine, or a field of them, isn't going to be an obstacle to that guy. He's not going to go anywhere near it. The RFS in New South Wales fob it off and just say, the aviation experts will do their risk management and it's up to them, we have nothing to do with it. But, no sane pilot, and most of them are sane, some are crazy, but most of them are sane. But no employer is going to say, you can go in there, boys, have at. They're going to do their risk assessment, they're going to go, we're not going anywhere near the place. And the RFS won't acknowledge that formally, the government won't acknowledge that formally, no one will. That's the sort of thing. Everything that should be a showstopper for these things, they just blatantly ignore. And this is the inside view. This is a different aircraft in Spain, but you look at the way he's soaring at the controls to keep that aircraft over the target. They're not going to be doing the Red Bull thing between the turbines to drop retardant on these fires. So it's just absurd. So we're going to lose the use of aerial tankers to fight fires. We'll have to go in there, they say we'll have to go in there on the ground and just use ground forces like we normally do, but that's us, the surrounding neighbours, who said we didn't want the stuff in the first place. So the removal of the aerial firefighting option is a big thing, especially in your country, in our country, and basically everywhere, and they won't acknowledge it. We've seen the cost and the stuff before, so I won't dwell on that. We'll try and move into some political stuff now and what we can do about it. I'm pretty cynical. I'm getting more cynical every day. And I think until we acknowledge the real problems here, we're not going to, we can niggle around the edges, but we've really got to get to the meat of it and acknowledge that things aren't right. And our opponents are ruthless. You call them ideological and all these things, but they're just really ruthless. No rules apply to them, and all the rules apply to us. And we've really got to find a way through this to get to force change and to induce them to change. I'm not sure how to do that yet. They say NREN's taken a zero tolerance approach. I think that's helped with the clarity of message. We've all done the things we've normally done. We've all written to local members. We've all gone to protests. We've stood a couple of those up. You never get any public feedback that you're making a difference, but I think inside we do. We do talk to people, politicians and others. I think the missing target there is a lot of the bureaucrats and people behind the scenes that you don't see out the front. We can hassle the politicians, we might even vote them out occasionally, but the bureaucrats are faceless and they never lose their jobs, they just turn up to work. Or the people advising the politicians, we've got to identify who those people are, we've got to put pressure onto those people. We can't just think changing the politician is going to change things. I don't think it's that simple, and you can see through the past 20, 30 years we've had several governments of different persuasions, and neither of them has stopped the trajectory. And the coalition has enacted most of the legislation that's enabled this stuff. So there needs to be another way. We need to get at the people who are really directing traffic behind the scenes, whether that's some supranational agency or whether it's just our bureaucrats completely brainwashed that never get fired and just keep advising the government of the wrong stuff all the time. But it's not serving us, and in my simplistic view the government should be there to serve the citizen before corporate interests, but I'm just naive, I guess. So we'd like to call a moratorium, that's what we've been trying for, to stop and have a critical look at the technical side of all this. And once again, they never really look at the technical side. They hide all the figures, they hide all the data. That's the fight today, is that over data. They do everything based on forecast models. They tweak the models to get the result they want, and then they make policy on the models. And then they ignore the data. And if you request the data or want the data, they hide the data or they fudge the data like the BOM. So those are the things we have to overcome. And so all you've got left is to run on is your gut to a large extent, but this goes back to your life experience. Don't believe, because they keep parroting cheap and reliable, we saw the picture of the power prices, it's the exact opposite. So we don't accept what people are saying if it doesn't gel with your life experience. So question what you're being told, and I'm not telling you what to think, which is what they do every day on ABC and every other media platform, but I'm just asking you to think and to engage. And there's an election cycle coming up, and what can we do? And we're NREN, we're focused on power. There's a bunch of other community groups that are disaffected, focusing on the alt-freedom groups, on the COVID disaster, and all these sorts of things. I think there's a lot of disaffected people. We need to unite on the ground and endorse candidates that support our point of view, and then mobilise the people on the ground. We can't do it just as NREN anti-renewable people, or just the anti-vax people and all these other people that we associate with, because we've all been through the same things. We have our little areas, but we've got to look at the big picture and use those people all together on the ground, because we're being done over by our own government, our own people the whole time, and we need to force change. Now, getting people elected is hard work, and the experts keep telling me we can't do it, and that may be true, but we've got to put them under pressure, and we've got to let them know we're here and that we have an alternative, and we're voting for an effective alternative, and we're stopping the votes going to them. So never underestimate the level of the lie they tell. The lies they tell are big, and if they get caught out, they just tell bigger lies. But again, if you see BS, hear BS, have the guts, please, to stand up and call out BS, whether it's your local council or some other forum. So I'm about done there, but I hope that helps a little bit. Enron will keep fighting. We're not sure exactly, we don't have any grand strategy yet that we can say this will yield success. I think I said earlier, we don't have political power, we don't have economic power, we don't have judicial power, all we've got is people power, so we need to use that as best we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Grant. We are organising another forum in Sydney. It will be on Sunday, September 29th at the Guildford Leagues Club. If anyone's in Sydney, they can make their way there. It's going to be a great forum. Di Lee has agreed to speak there. Mr. Craig Kelly will be there. We're going to have a whole bunch of great speakers, as we did in June in DY. So we're putting these forums on to try and sway the public in whichever way that we can. But right now we have Birchall Wilson. Now Birchall is going to talk about lobby groups, dirty tricks, cancel culture and doxing. He is one of the most impactful public policy economists of his generation. As the chief economist of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Birchall led a business coalition that successfully prosecuted the case to rationalise the renewable energy target, and in doing so erased $12.5 billion from the Nationals' energy bill over a period of 16 years. Now, as a result of that, Birchall was doxed by the renewable sector in an effort to get him fired, and he was betrayed by business leaders and conservative politicians who allowed his career to be completely derailed. So he certainly has the battle scars and he knows what he's talking about. Please welcome Birchall Wilson.
Yeah, the sad thing about all that is I don't think I'd do it again because the cost is pretty high, and that's the way these renewable energy activists work. They target individuals. So if you put your hand up and say, look, this makes no sense, this is a high-cost form of carbon abatement, and it's bad for the economy, they will come after you. And that's precisely what they did to me. And so, Chief Economist at the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, reasonably high-profile position in Canberra. I've got economics and law degrees from the Australian National University, ex-Treasury, ex-financial markets. And as soon as I looked at this industry, I realised none of this made any sense. So if you want to abate carbon, you don't do it for $65 per tonne under the renewable energy target. You use the sort of revegetation measures that Tony Abbott was using for $10 or $12 a tonne. So reasonably straightforward economics. And the thing you realise about the renewable energy target, once you look at it, is it's a huge gravy train of corporate welfare for energy companies. So the ASIL Allen modelling report put together for the Warburton Review, I added up the numbers in the back pages of that report. From 2014 to 2030, there were $38 billion in subsidies, and that's only the renewable energy target. There's a whole range of other green schemes at the state and federal level that Alan's alluded to and provided detail around. So being the naive, well-intentioned individual I was in Canberra, I said, look, none of this makes any sense. I went on 7:30 report, ran rings around Sarah Ferguson. She had no response. She was actually quite curious as to what I was talking about, so I sent her my presentation that I gave to an energy forum after we were done. So, yeah, the media just have no idea, and they have no idea because no one's briefing them. How many economists work at the ABC? I don't know. None. Alan Kohler's a high school graduate. The guy can't call himself an economist. It's ridiculous. So what the industry did in order to get me fired and shut me up was they hacked into my Facebook account. They ransacked about 12 months worth of material, tried to find anything they could use to discredit me. And the morning that the Warburton Review was due to come out, they sent about 8 or 9 screenshots to the Canberra Press Gallery. And, oh, heaven forfend, I think I called Joe Hockey a little fat bastard in private amongst friends, and that was enough. So, on the one hand, the moral calculus here is horrific, and it speaks to just how bad things are. You have $38 billion in subsidies for large corporates, on the one hand, that make no sense, versus a tongue-in-cheek remark by me amongst friends that, look, Joe Hockey, even if I'd said that to his face, he wouldn't care. He just had no idea. The only people who cared were the Canberra Press Gallery trying to get me fired. And on top of that, a harebrained ex-politician narcissist like Kate Carnell as my CEO at the Chamber, what chance did I have? So, and she calls me, these articles getting written up in the press. She says, oh, resign or you're fired when you come in on Tuesday. So I said, oh, thanks, Kate. Let me have a chat to my lawyer. So, yeah, what was the point? Why did I bother? And Tony Abbott, on the strength of the advocacy I did at the Chamber, he did wind this thing back from 41 gigawatt hours to 33,000 gigawatt hours. And that ultimately took about $12.5 billion off these people. So it cost me my job at the Chamber, probably my career, and all those hit pieces. If you Google my name, that's a lot of what comes up, and that will cost you jobs. That will cost me jobs for the rest of my career. It's cost me jobs in DC, cost me a career, cost me a visa, cost me a potential wife as well. That's how bad these people are. So when I came back, I thought, hey, I'm an idiot. These politicians are trash. I'll help John Ruddock run for office by running the lower house. So I was the Liberal Democrats candidate for Bathurst at the state election last year, and with very few resources, there's only so much you can do. So I'm guaranteed none of you knew who I was or voted for me, or at least very few of you did. But look, what was I running on? One of the key issues I was running on were securing our jobs, making sure that this New South Wales government that didn't care very much about Lithgow, the coal mining industry, or the power generation sector, that hold them accountable. And look, I realise I have to tiptoe around this issue because Paul Toole's probably got second cousins and third cousins in the room who are going to get emotional when I point out Paul Toole was part of the government that did this to you. Paul Toole is responsible for dumping these wind turbines on top of Oberon, and he may tell you he's not, because that's what politicians do. They say, oh, it's not me, I'm a National Party member, and it's not me, it's the Liberals, it's Matt Keane. No, it's him. Did he cross the floor in Parliament? No, absolutely not. When it comes down to what matters, these guys are absent. They're missing in action. So Paul Toole is going to soft soap. He's going to tell you that he opposed this stuff. And look, maybe he does now, but if you have a fair weather parliamentarian representing you, who's going to tell you one thing when he thinks you need to hear it, and then walks into Parliament and dump an industrial landscape on top of you, why vote for him? Why? And look, maybe you vote for him because he's kind of a nice guy. He's kind of, what was he, a high school teacher or something? But he's not an individual of integrity, and I'm quite happy to say that. I'm quite happy to go on record with that. If he wants to sue me for defamation, I've got the track record. I've got his track record in Parliament to fall back on. What's he got? He's got the National Party infrastructure, and what's that? That's just a whole bunch of taxpayer money that he gets delivered every election cycle from you guys when you vote for him, because every time you vote for him, he gets about, $4.60 in public funding. So anyway, I ran for office. The other thing they're doing now is this gender reassignment stuff in Victoria. If you're a 14-year-old, you can go to a doctor and have them reassign your gender. So there's all sorts of things happening that no one knows about, no one talks about, because the press don't cover this stuff. And one of the key ones is energy policy. So that's why I ran. The answers for me, I mean, my guys in DC, they've got an 80% win rate on this stuff. They build grassroots coalitions that are bigger than this entire country. So you can have these capacities off the shelf. The problem is there's no one in this country to fund them. The entire Conservative movement is just completely tapped out as far as I can tell. They dump money on these numpties at the IPA and the CIS. The IPA has $8.5 million budget every year. What do they do with it? It's just a staging ground for more Liberal politicians who'll get into Parliament and do absolutely nothing. So if you want to win, I know how it's done. Problem is it costs money. If you don't have money, you can volunteer. You can engage with your local communities. And it would have been fantastic if I'd had half of the people in this room offer to come and hand out how to votes at the last state election, but it's just, it was exhausting. I was sleeping 4 hours a night, had 6 weeks worth of bronchitis on the end of that campaign, and wondered why I'd done it to myself. Because fundamentally, what you're dealing with is indifference. This only happens because no one stands up and says no. And this is why they're terrified. You've got groups now, 10,000 strong in Port Stephens, 10,000 strong in Illawarra, and a huge grassroots organisation that's forming up in the Central West. This terrifies the politicians. If those groups start getting active, and one of these is run by a 17-year-old kid down in Wollongong. So it's not hard. The anger there is real. It's palpable. It just has to be appropriately directed. And it's easy to do that using digital media and email. So I've got cards by the Light Australian publication. If anyone wants to reach out, feel free. Because, yeah, I could buy emails for like 80% of the Bathurst electorate and then start communicating to them directly and telling them what the hell's going on. It's incredibly powerful, completely bypasses the media, and you can use it to mobilise people, fundraise, and get elected. Anyway, I'm tired. I'm sure you are as well, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Birchall. So we have one more speaker. If you do have any questions, please head to the back. There's a little notepad there. You can write your question down for the Q&A that's going to happen straight after this next speaker. But his name is Craig Kelly, former member for Hughes between 2010 and 2022. In 2020, Craig's Facebook page had higher levels of engagement than either the Prime Minister or opposition leader at the time, leading the Sydney Morning Herald to describe him as one of Australia's most influential politicians. Unfortunately, he's paid the price for his convictions, but in my opinion, we need more people like that in politics. So please welcome Craig Kelly.
You sure? Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone, for hanging in on what's been a long afternoon. First, I was a Member of Parliament for over 12 years. I sat down in that federal parliament in Canberra, was first elected in 2010, and I won elections in 2013, 16, 19, and unfortunately lost in 2022, but that's another long story. During that time, I was chairman of the Coalition Backbench Committee on Energy and Climate. I was also on the... I thought it was my phone. I was also on the Parliamentaries Committee for Energy. I've done tours, study tours through Germany, the USA, Japan and Taiwan on energy subjects. So it's a subject that I've been very close to throughout my previous parliamentary career. And I've got a few photos that probably sums up my experience in photos. Just a few happy snaps that I took. If I might need some help here, Stephen, to get those up. Just a couple of happy snaps of some photos that I took that I think reminds me of Canberra when I went down there. That's the first one. I think that sums up Canberra very adequately. It is a toxic green swamp. It is controlled by Labor and the Greens. There are a lot of people just in there wallowing around in that green toxic environment. It is really I think that picture, it is quite humorous, but it is actually how the whole place operates. Next one is the one I took in, this is one from the Parliamentary Chamber I took, I think if this is right. There you go. But that's exactly what I think of my former colleagues. They're either sheep or clowns, most of them all. It is really just, I'll do one more little quick happy snap I've got here. That's another one of all Parliament. That's their voting procedures there. How they work it out is you just wander across and told if you follow your mates across and vote for it. People would walk in the chamber and they go, what do we vote? They wouldn't even know what they were voting on. They just go and sit down half the time. It really was an eye-opening experience. I think a lot of people outside of Parliament, you look upon them, you look on the debating chambers, and you think, wow, these guys are all so intelligent and they're so smart. It ain't true. The very first day I went there, I was driving up the big ramp, the big flags up on the hill, and I'm there with my late father. I said, Dad, mate, how am I going to, I'd just been elected sort of thing, and I'd come from outside the political system sort of like completely, I'm going, Dad, how am I going to bluff my way through this? You know? He said, mate, you'll be right, son. He said, just keep firing. He said, so the first week you go there and you're meeting everyone and it's all very intimidating. You go into the big chamber and you're seeing what you've only seen on television before. You know? You think, wow, geez, I don't think I can really do this. I've got to give a speech. How am I going to speak in Parliament? It's going to be terrifying. Right? After a week there, you realise, hang on a minute, these people are more stupid than I am. It is really hard to explain how stupid most of these politicians are, as I think Alan said it, how little they actually know, and what the damage that they are doing to our economy. And when it comes to the subject of energy, it is such a complicated topic and subject. I see exactly what's happened. You've had very smart people that knew exactly how all these programs worked, went into Parliament under the guise, we've got to have all this renewables in the system, and they have scammed the system for billions and billions of dollars that has destroyed, it is wrecking our economy and destroying our nation's competitive advantage. Just a couple other slides I think are important. 2006, this is when the mess started. Now it's important to know, it was the John Howard government that put in the renewable energy target. It wasn't Labor. Howard, the Liberals, put these targets in first, and Labor just ramped them up. So in 2006, Albanese said, the future is renewables. Well, let's just see how that's worked out with all the subsidies and bits and pieces that we've done. Now this graph here, this shows the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, starting in 1993 to 2024. That's in the blue, and electricity price index is in the red. So you can see there, from 1990 to 2006, electricity prices increased in line with the CPI. That's what we'd expect. And if we go back 20 years past, that's similar to what's happened. In 2006, we started to bring all these cheap renewables into the system that were meant to lower electricity prices. And you can see in that red line how they've actually gone up through the roof and continue to go up and up and up. Right? So you can see it's almost double what the CPI, increasing twice as fast as the CPI. Now that's today. What's happening down the track? We've seen some predictions here. I'll give one more. I think if there's one slide you take away today, take this one away. This is Australia. This is the electricity price index, Australia compared to the USA, starting in the year 2000. Now the blue line on the bottom is the USA, and again you can see there, from the year 2000 to about 2006, we basically pegged the USA for electricity price increases. 2006 we brought in and started to bring in all these mad renewables, and you can see what has happened to our electricity prices in Australia compared to the electricity prices in the USA. So we now have prices here in this country 2 and 3 times more expensive for electricity than what businesses and consumers are paying in comparison in the United States of America. That has destroyed this nation's competitive advantage. The very reason why we could afford to pay high wages, the very reason, one of the reasons why we were a rich and prosperous country is because we had low energy costs. We had that beautiful black coal seam that runs up and down our eastern seaboard. That's our treasure, that's our wealth. And we've got these nutcases in Parliament saying we can't use it, we're going to give you all these cheap renewables. And they have destroyed this nation's competitive advantage. Now, when you do that, what's that done to the... And we've got down the track, what are we expecting? We're expecting down the track further increases in electricity prices to come. And I've got to think that we've got a guy called Chris Bowen. Seriously, this guy just does not understand what he is doing. He simply does not have a clue. Another example is the USA versus California. Now, as I said, many US states are paying around about 10 to 11 cents US per kilowatt hour, which is less than a third of what we are paying. The only state in the USA that is comparable with Australia is California, because they've gone down this renewables track. So you can see there what's happened in comparison with the USA and California. The USA has had a little bit of a price increase, but the Californian electricity prices has skyrocketed compared to the USA, to the rest of the USA. And you can see that, the damage that's happened to the Californian economy because of that. This chart here, this is electricity generated by coal around the world. The top one, for the world, the top line, the top wiggly line on the top, that's the world electricity generated by coal. 45,000 terawatts. So 45,000 terawatts is the unit of measure. China is the middle blue line, 25,000. India, 6,000. And that line sort of along the bottom there, just above zero, that's Australia, 419. So that's less than 1% of the electricity generated by coal around the world is being done so in Australia. And yet we are the problem.
But we're happy to dig the coal out.
Correct.
It in a big bucket and send it
Correct.
out to India and China.
Absolutely 100%.
We're going to save the planet at 1%.
Absolutely 100% correct. So what's going to happen?
Lines commit financial, economic suicide.
So we're going to have these coal ships pulling out of Wollongong and Newcastle, dodging through the wind turbines, offshore wind turbines we built, to take our coal up to China so they can produce cheap stuff, but our politicians go, no, sorry, you can't use this here. I'll come up to this one. Now, this is quickly where our coal-fired power stations are. You can see this graph starts in 2009. It starts at 28 gigawatts. That's the capacity of all our coal-fired power stations going back over a decade ago. We're now down to 21 gigawatts. That is expected to decrease to under 5 gigawatts in a decade's time. So just 21 gigawatts is our capacity today. That's going down to 5. And what's happening in the rest of the world? India. India have plans to build new 80 gigawatts. So that's 4 times what we have in existing coal-fired power stations. India are planning to build that new by 2032. And we're closing ours down, building nothing, and India is building 4 times what we have. In China, it's even worse. In China, they have under construction and development today 408 gigawatts. That is 20 times our existing coal fleet. The numbers are incredible, and that's on top. They already have over 1,137 gigawatts of electricity, coal-fired generation capacity. They're adding another 408 onto it, and we're meant to close ours down. It is sheer, unadulterated madness what we're doing to our country. And we're now already starting to see the costs of this. Hang on, I've got here. Whoop. Well, Albanese, this will show some of the costs. Albanese, this is just some of the lies that they tell us all the time, every single day. This is a tweet from Albanese a couple of weeks ago. He's creating more jobs, higher wages and lower taxes. That's what he's claiming. Let's just quickly go through some of these. Firstly, jobs. This is a graph of unemployed Australians. It starts off when Albanese was elected back in June 2020, or actually when he took up office. We had just under 500,000 people in the unemployment queues. Today, that is over 620,000. So we've had over 100,000, something like 130,000 Australians have been added to the unemployment queues since Albanese was elected. And he's telling you what a wonderful job he's doing on job creation. Remember, you can fill the MCG with 100,000 people. So just imagine that MCG, when the football finals come around with 100,000 people in the crowd, that's the number of Australians that have joined the unemployment queues in the last 2 years since Albanese has taken over. Of course, then when it comes to real, if you've got a job, real gross household disposable income, we're one of the worst performing nations in the world. We've gone backwards because we've got the cost of inflation is going up faster than wages. And the cost of inflation is all being driven by electricity prices. Again, this graph quickly shows we are going backwards compared to the rest of the world. This again is real disposable household income. The OECD is the blue, Australia is the red. You can see we are going backwards as a nation. Well, taxes. Albanese says taxes are lower. No. In 2022-2023, the taxes increase paid by Australia were the highest in the developed world. We're paying, average Australians paying 7.6% more in taxes than they were previously, outstripping every other country, and Albanese is saying he's reducing taxes. So don't take my word for it. Financial Review. Australia records biggest income decline in the developed world. Tax, this is a graph of tax to income ratio. So it's the percentage of what the government takes from you in taxes compared to your income. You can see we're at record levels. You can see that little green line, that's the forecast that was last year. See where it dips down? That's the great big tax cut that Albanese is giving us. That will still have us well above any other thing we've experienced before in this nation when it comes to tax to income ratios. But of course he told us life will be cheaper. But there is some truth in that. We've got so many stores closing down that you can go and snap up bargains because these stores are just liquidating all their stock and closing down. We've got a record number of retailers and hospitality businesses closing this nation as we speak today. And GDP per capita is going backwards, and that is the important measure. Too often we let the media get away with, they talk about GDP, which is the overall size of the economy. Now that's, if you want to grow the economy, we could annex some islands in Indonesia or perhaps the South Island of New Zealand, bring those into the Australian economy and, oh look, the Australian economy is bigger. But what really counts is each individual size of the economic pie, and that has shrunk over the last 4 quarters. We are in a GDP per capita recession. Living standards in this country are going backwards, primarily because of this renewable energy madness. So what does Albanese do to cover up this mess? This is a graph of net overseas migration from the last century, 1900 to the year 2000. You can see there the red dotted line in the middle is the average, which is around about 80,000 new migrants a year. That's what we'd averaged a year, and that made us a great country. We brought people in from all over the world that added to the value of this country, that brought their skills and their entrepreneurial drive and came here to work and for new opportunities. It was around about 80,000 to 100,000 a year. Now, what's Albanese done? He's kicked it up to over 500,000 people a year. So in 2 years, we've had over 1 million new migrants come into this country. That's a rate 5 times what we were used to having. So what can possibly go wrong if we do this? Again, that's quick graph there shows that our population growth is the highest that's ever been in this nation going back over 100 years, except for a very brief period after the Second World War. We are growing at 2.5%. That is like third world type stuff at the moment. We're also currently, over the last decade, we have been one of the world's leaders in housing construction. So when people say, oh, there's this Claire O'Neill, it's the government minister, she goes, oh yes, this problem of housing shortages has gone on for a long, long time. No, we have been one of the world leader. Only Switzerland has been ahead of us, and only just, about building more houses per capita than we have. And you can see, you take Switzerland out, we're a long way in front of the rest of the world. We are a world champion builder of homes in this country. But at the moment, housing construction is going backwards because of the cost, so much of the cost. Again, we now have the lowest number of dwellings approved since over a decade. Go back to 2011, 2012. So what happens? We bring all these people into the country. We don't have enough houses for them. We end up something like this. I know it's a bit dramatic, and it's what some of the good images that you could make with AI, but that's the situation that we've got. We have excess demand for rent of properties and for purchase of properties. So what's that doing to prices for houses? This is Sydney and Melbourne house prices and unit prices. You look at the graph along the top. The average house price to rent in Sydney is now over $1,000 per week. It's jumped up from just over $600 a week. That is money that comes out of everyone's pocket that simply doesn't go to all the other things that could be spent on. And you can see the same there with Melbourne houses and Sydney units. But that's if you're lucky enough to be able to live in a house. We've got record homelessness in this country. Drive up and down the coast from Queensland and see people living in tents and under bridges. This is what we've got. We call them Albanese villas. We're building in this country what is the richest country. We have families that are actually living in tents and caravans up and down our coast because they can't afford housing, because we're bringing all these people into the country to cover up for the declines in GDP for per capita, which is all because of this mad renewable energy target. Another Albaneseville. Just quickly, I'll leave you with this last quick graph. This graph shows what is our CO2 emissions and CO2 equivalent that we have to get down to net zero. So everyone will talk about net zero, and you only hear them talk about electricity. But electricity is the blue down the bottom. That's only a third of what we call our emissions. You've got all these other sectors: agriculture, industry, transport, our waste sector, fugitive emissions from mining operations. That's 70%. That's all still got to come down the track. So if you're committed to net zero, you've got to go around and wreck the agricultural industry of this country. That's why we've got to fight back and push against this stuff. It is going to wreck the country. We're going to leave this place for our kids and our grandkids with less prosperity and less opportunities than we had. We've got to say, not on our watch. And we've got to get out there and we've got to fight and we've got to be brave enough to talk about it and call this out. And this is a debate that we can win. I say the voice debate proves that we can win it. When we started with that voice, the referendum campaign, it was 80% were all in favour of it. And I remember I came out and I said in an article in The Guardian, I said, no, I'm going to vote against this. And I was like the worst person in the world. How could you even possibly think about this? But we had the debate and we put the facts on the table and slowly put one Australian by one Australian. We turned them from a yes voter into a no voter, and we won that case in a landslide, 60-40. We can do the same thing on this renewable energy target. Because as Professor Plimer went through, the science is on our side. As Alan Moran went through, the economics is on our side, and all the data is on our side. We've just got to get out there and spread the message to other Australians to end this, what is going to wreck our country. So my message to you today is, please go out there, spread the message, get on social media. If you don't have a social media account, get someone in your family to set you up with it, share stuff, get involved in the debate online. Every post and every little bit counts. There's no magic bullet. It's repetition of effort. It's just punching away, and eventually, I believe, we'll be able to win this. But it's going to be a long, hard fight. I'll give you one more slide. This is the damage to the environment that these things are doing. It's not only an economic disaster, it's an environmental disaster, what these people are doing to our country. So look, thanks for all coming, and let's keep up the fight.
All right, I know it's been a long day for all our speakers, but let's cram in a quick Q&A, and then we'll finish up. So all the speakers from today, if you could please come to the front, and we'll do this very quickly. This is an open question to the panel. How do we stop this renewable nonsense? Anyone want to take that one?
I'll kick it off. You've got to have courage to speak up and fight. You've got to let your politicians know that if they're going to keep going down this track, that they're not going to get you a vote. At the moment, remember, we've got both the Coalition, the Liberal and National Party, and Labor Party all signed up to net zero. Now, Scott Morrison did that too. Scott Morrison came into the party room one day, and after we won the 2019 election, by saying, well, you're not going to sign up to net zero, he turned up the party room one day and made the announcement, I've come back from overseas, we're now going to agree to net zero. There was no debate in the nation. So we've got the major parties in this country actually going down this track. The way we've got to do it is making sure we let them know that if they keep going down this track, they're going to lose our votes.
And good politicians are frightened politicians.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, Alan, how much damage will spending trillions of dollars on renewables have to our economy?
Well, basically it destroys it. We can see the outcome of that over the last 20 years, the trajectory in terms of ending up where we are in terms of the right. We can see where we are in terms of the reduction in productivity, and that can be put in different ways. Others have put it in terms of real wages falling or whatever. But they've been reducing, and they're going to continue reducing. God knows how far it goes, because basically we can see from the investment levels, we can see from the interventions in the economy which are being made by the present government, much worse even than the Liberal government, which was terrible itself. We can see it's going downhill. I don't know. who knows how far it can go? We have the Argentinian situation, which we've seen. It's quite possible we could follow that trajectory.
This one's for Birchall. What are the problems with the bureaucracy? Can it be reformed?
Well, the only problem with the bureaucracy is our politicians don't have the courage to sack these people, particularly on the Conservative side. I've heard this from the cabinet level. They are too scared to fire senior bureaucrats, and that's all on them. So keep voting Conservative, keep voting for Paul Toole and the coalition. That's what you get. Vote different next time. Vote for a Libertarian candidate who will go away and humiliate these people publicly, as John Ruddock has tended to do in the upper house, and you'll start to get completely different outcomes.
Grant, what are your main concerns with renewable energy zones, and do you think most people are aware of them?
I actually don't think many people are aware of them, but I haven't really thought about that question much. My main concern with renewable energy stuff is that it doesn't work. That's basically it. I mean, we can talk about all the problems of having it, about firefighting or not looking at them, or infrasound or BPA, but the fundamental problem is an engineering one, is that they don't work. So why are we doing it? So that's what really upsets me, and it's all needless. We didn't need to do any of this, so why are we making life so hard? I mean, life's hard enough without it creating problems, and most of our problems are created by the government. That's my current view. So,
this one's to Professor Plimer. How do Australian commentators justify that Australia has the worst record for the loss of native species in the world?
Well, we don't. I think I've got a powerful voice. No, we don't. This is again the BS that we get fed all the time, and we get fed that this country is a bad country. We treat our environment poorly. That we treat each other poorly. We don't. I've spent my life travelling the world. I currently work in third world countries. Been to the Soviet Union. Been to other communist countries. This is absolute paradise. It's paradise in the way we treat people. It's paradise for the average person. It's paradise for the environment. And what these commentators are telling us is something that's demonstrably untrue, such that they can get us to change our ways to impoverish ourselves even more. We should be the wealthiest country per capita than any country in the world. We have millions of years of uranium. We've got thousands of years of coal, thousands of years of gas. Economies live or die on cheap energy. It's so simple. If your energy is expensive, you start to die. And we have actually ticked a wonderful own goal. All the major parties are involved in this. And we are being fed information which is demonstrably incorrect. As I showed in some of my slides, we're not in any crisis at all. The only crisis is a crisis of stupidity.
Okay, Paul, thorium. Why would we use thorium?
So one advantage of thorium is it is a bit harder to use for weapons proliferation. One concern about the uranium fuel cycle is it produces plutonium, which can be chemically removed and turned into weapons. But there are other ways to handle that. So it's another nuclear fuel. There are a couple of advantages, but there isn't a lot of history with it. So most of the engineering is going into the uranium generation for reactors.
Okay, this one's for Craig. Which politician or party can we blame for exporting our cheap energy to the world while we import expensive renewables in return?
I think he said the bloody lot of them. Seriously, I actually hold my former colleagues in the Liberal Party very responsible for this. Because I know in that party room, the majority of them, or close to the majority of them, know that this is a complete and utter nonsense. but they don't have the backbone or the spine to stand up and say this is wrong. They want to just go along with it because they think it's, it'll get them re-elected. Well, what happened at the last election, we saw all those seats fall to the Teals, and everyone that lost their seat to the Teals at the last election, they were all the bedwetters. Into the wet. They were the ones that, you've got to have more renewables, you've got to have more subsidies, we can't take these things away. And they lost their seats. If they had stood and fought and said, this is bullshit, and gone into their electorates and say, what, Zali, you're going to put all the wind turbines up and down the Manly coast? If they had stood up and fought on the facts and the data and the evidence, they could have held their seat. But because they sold out, because they were so weak and so spineless, they lost their seats. So yes, the Labor and the Greens, we know they're rabid socialists that will always go down this track, but the people we expect to stand up for us and fight the good fight have been the Liberals and the Nationals, and they're the ones that have abandoned us.
Final two questions. Professor Plimer, Tim Flannery has studied mammals. Why are we listening to people like him on climate?
Well, Flannery is a very, very good communicator. He's in the pocket of the ABC, and he is selling this story of doom and gloom. And we as humans are actually hardwired to look over our shoulder for that grizzly bear that's going to get us. We are very receptive to these stories, and we fell for it. It's cost us billions for these desalination plants in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide. The Perth plant was necessary because the underground water was getting low as a result of the increase in population in Perth. He's a very good communicator. He gave the message that people wanted to hear. He frightened us witless about sea level change, yet lived at sea level on the Hawkesbury River and bought the blocks next door to him. Here we have someone who was a hypocrite and who is pushing the sensational agenda. Now, if you're a sensationalist, you will get reported in the media. If you give the story of the facts, whether you like them or not, like me, you don't get reported. Simply because I'm not frightening you to death. And by the way, as I frightened you, please open your wallets. That's the story.
All right, final question, and thank you everyone for coming today. Okay, I'm going to open this question to all of our speakers so they all get an opportunity to answer this. What is the government's agenda in your opinions?
Politicians, it's performative. These people just want to be in office when it comes to the coalition side. So they've got no clue. They don't think strategically. The left do. The left take politics seriously. And short answer to your question, what are we doing in response to this? If you want to win, my number is over there. You call me and I give you the game plan and you go out and knock it out of the park. It's not hard, but it does require resources. And our elites hate us. They haven't contacted me. No one's contacted me. No one wants to actually do something. It's all performative. A lot of this resistance to it on the ground is real, but there's no catalyst, there's no organisation, and there's no functional implementation of a solution. That's where we are.
Yeah, look, it all starts basically at our community level, you know. So we've got to look at sort of the council option. We've got to hold the council accountable, you know. We've got to look at transparency as well, you know. So and information like forums like this. This is the sort of thing we need to get people to have the knowledge to make the informed decisions. So to me, it starts at grassroots level, and then it percolates its way up.
Motivations. One of the things I always like to keep in mind is that we can't read people's minds. I don't know what motivates some of these people, but we can see their behavior. And their behavior is to sell out the best interests of the people, and then they end up with cushy jobs afterwards. So from that, I would infer motivation.
I'd second what Paul said pretty much. I mean, the explanation I use is you don't know what goes on. It's like the black box model where something goes in, something comes out, but you don't know what happens inside the black box. But funnily enough, everything that happens and the result that comes out is always more expense, more oppression to the citizen, and what's on the tin isn't what happens with the policy. Whatever the policy is named, the effects on the ground are usually the exact opposite. And the politicians are the same. They try and spin a good story and get re-elected, but I think ultimately, yes, they're just looking down the road. I don't think most of them don't seem, by their actions or the results of their actions, loyal to us or the country. They've got something else in mind.
Well, it's self-preservation first and foremost, especially for the more conservative politicians who are the sheep in the graph that Craig showed. They basically will go along and they see an electorate which has been frightened by various scares, and they'll go along with it thinking it doesn't do much harm in doing so. From the point of view of the left, they are willing to push the envelope. They are much more ideological. They do not believe the market and free market system we have will give good results. They don't believe that it works very effectively in terms of the growth rate, and they certainly don't think it works in terms of the results for, quote, the poor, unquote, and various other groups. So they do push the envelope, and there's no one pushing the other direction.
And what scares the politicians the most is being voted out of office. And that's why if you've got a sitting member who's not doing his job, you've got to go after them and say, mate, if you don't stand up, and if you don't fight for us, we're going to vote against you at the next election. My father and my grandfather, my great-grandfather might have voted for you or your side of politics, but if you continue down the path that you're going, I'm going to vote against you and mobilise all my friends to vote against you as well. That's what puts the scare in them, and that's what you can get some change from.
A final comment, and a cynical one. I'm in a safe state seat and a safe federal seat. Christopher Pyne's former seat, it's Boo. And I have the sneaking suspicion that my local members don't want to be in government because they might have to work harder and they might have to field a press call at 6 o'clock in the morning if they're a minister. Whereas if they're a backbencher in opposition on over $200,000 a year, that's their salary plus various committees, then it's a pretty bloody good job. And if you're not motivated and you don't care about this country, then you just get on the gravy train. And so what we've heard from the other speakers is we have to keep them frightened, we have to keep communicating with them, and we have to let them know that they might lose my vote, but they're going to lose all my friends and other people. So you've got to keep them under pressure. We've got a question from seat C19.
I'm very curious to know, what are the things in terms of trends, in terms of laws being passed, when they're being passed, no awareness in the public, like just secret things seemingly to go through? I don't know the whole political landscape, but it's where is the accountability on the decision makers when all this goes belly up? Like, we get a lot of people aren't aware they're in survival mode, but what is the political accountability other than losing your seat, other than being fired personally? Lawyers are lawyers, can they be sued?
Unfortunately, there's not the real accountability. You find many of the politicians that are responding to the COVID period that made a complete disaster, but every decision is completely wrong, have now moved on to high-paid executive jobs. Gladys is working, Bereject, and she said Optus at $1 million a year, Perites with BHP at $1 million a year. They've all moved on, sort of thing.
I just have to make a laugh. Someone said, "Oh, we need change manager or whatever." I worked in one of the biggest banks as a senior change manager, and on a little project, so it doesn't go belly up, you need an accountability framework, like kind of little one. So we're talking about like what the hell's going on, and the transparency is terrible with the laws they're passing and the impacts. So I guess at a higher level, is there any, you speak to a lot of people, are there things being done at that sort of federal level to get more visibility, accountability, transparency?
No, I'll be honest, there's no. If you're you're running this, you don't want accountability. You don't want transparency. You want to do a lot of stuff behind closed doors. And you'd actually be surprised how much the bureaucrats have a say over many of these things and these decisions. Like I've seen when I was there we had Josh Frydenberg was the minister. A lot of the decisions were being put upon him when he was the climate and energy minister, all by the bureaucracy. And he wouldn't even have a clue about what was happening half the time. And they would just tick and flick this stuff. And then by the time he's now with one of the big banks or something, and they all move on, and the mess is there left for all of us, everyone else to pay up. So. Yeah. Well, that's why the accountability comes. You've got to really.
The Federal Corruption Committee.
Yeah, but that's sorry, you're talking about the ICAC committee that they set up. That's for real corrupt activity, right? You're talking about you're just talking about a lot of complete incompetent activity as well, right?
I do have one thought on that. You've heard the joke, the beatings will continue until morale improves, right? In this case, we're being set up for hard times by an unaccountable bureaucracy who has no interest in transparency or accountability, right? And the beatings will continue until awakening improves. And then when the awakening improves, then these people can be held accountable. As long as they continue to lie to us at scale, and most people accept it because they want to be thought of as a good person and they're not willing to speak out against climate nonsense, so at some point, things will get hard enough that accountability can take place. But at this point, there doesn't seem to be a good feedback cycle.
I agree with what you're saying, but the sponsorship of that needs to come weekend
and lost everything and there's nothing left to lose. But we don't want to get to that point. And that's what I was saying before. I think it's got to start at the grassroots, from the councils up until the politicians, but we've got to get it sort of the groundswell from the base. Yeah.
I'm just curious because
yeah.
we need to change need that senior sponsorship. So if there's a corrupt commission, I think we should submit it to them and say, this is one of them.
All right, we've had a long day, so we better wrap it up. Thank you to all the speakers today. Thank you for all of you for coming and listening to this, and especially thank you to Tony for organising this. If you can give him a handshake or even a cuddle, please do so. He deserves it, so thank you very much.
I took that memory stick yesterday, didn't I? I think I did.
I don't see one.
How's your day?
Long day, but well worth it. It's very important. Every time I come to one of these community group meetings, me being a Sydney boy, a lot of this stuff is out of sight, out of mind, and I'm just completely blown away. Every time I come out to Oberon, or I was at the Illawarra recently with the offshore wind turbines, the stuff that these rural communities have to put up with, and all the politicians that are pushing this stuff are in Sydney. Chris Bowen, Tanya Plimer, Anthony Albanese, all the Teals, they're the ones pushing this stuff, but they don't actually come out here and see the devastation that's happening, not only the environmental devastation, but the devastation on communities. The fact that these people have to give up their time on a weekend to come and listen to speakers talk about this stuff, when we should be using the money that's going into renewable energy and building new roads and dams and maybe a high-speed rail or something like that.
Steve, none of this affects you in Warringah. Why are you here? Why do you care?
I care about Australia, and it grieves me that I live in an electorate where Zali Steggall is pushing this stuff, but on her very own website, she says, I do not believe in wind farms along Warringah's beachfront. The hypocrisy of that, she is a complete hypocrite for putting that on her website. There's other stuff on there. If you want to go and look at her policy page, there's little gems like that all over it.
But Steve, it's not hypocrisy. It's just hierarchy. She has her place above the others.
Well, it is policy because she wants a reduction in in emissions, a 75% reduction by 2035. So to get there, She needs to build large-scale industrial wind projects, large-scale industrial solar projects, and where are you going to put them? It happens here in rural communities on this beautiful landscape here. The Victorian government even admitted in one of their own documents that they're going to need 70% of agricultural land in Victoria to achieve net zero with renewable energy. I mean, this is the crazy madness of it all, yet people like Zali Steggall or Sophie Scamps or people like that are pushing this stuff. They're making it sound all wonderful and amazing and pushing it on the people in their electorates, but they don't want it in their electorates themselves. I mean, I don't have any problem with a Member of Parliament advocating for an industrial project, but put it in your electorate. Don't push it off on someone else where your voters won't see it.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.